Call the meeting to order. Will the recorder please call the roll?
Counselor Solty?
Here.
Counselor Savage?
Here.
Youth Representative?
Here.
Counselor Fleck?
Here.
Counselor Stennett?
Here.
Counselor Urban?
Here.
Counselor Roberts?
Here.
Mayor Gallant?
Here. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
There's no items to be added to the agenda. It brings us to item 4, appearances of interested citizens for items not on the agenda. This is a time for citizens to comment on items not listed on the agenda for a maximum of 30 minutes. The individual speakers must be recognized by presiding officer, provide their name and address, and will be allowed up to 5 minutes or less with council approval. Comments regarding any matters scheduled for public hearing may be provided only in that hearing. Comments on agenda items may be taken prior to council's discussion on that item. Council will not engage in any discussion or make any decision based on public comments at this time. However, council may take the comments under advisement for discussion and action at a further council meeting. So the first one I had on the online was Michael Bork. See here? Is he online? Seeing none. Kathleen Matson. Yes.
Well, hi, Councilman and Council ladies and Mayor. Well, I wanted to bring up that at one council meeting, previous council meeting, the council person asked the city manager, and then the attorney agreed that if the warming site, the freezing night place that was used last year, was adequate in compliance with Martin versus Boise, and they said yes, it would, so that would be the least that we could have for the homeless folks. And I don't recall the cost, but they were asked about annual costs, and I can't remember. But it's a bummer we didn't go that route, because we would have been in compliance with Martin versus Boise, and now we've opened a big can of worms, and the homeless folks are putting the word out, come on, Cottage Grove, that there's a lot of amenities, things you can have, and you don't have to worry about anything. And so more and more folks are coming, and we'll have to, put out more areas for homeless folks, and it'll just continue. And how many, 1,000 people will end up living here, or more and more, I don't know when the end will happen. Another thing is that since the homeless folks have been coming here, I've seen a lady sitting under the bridge, under I-5 bridge that goes to the on-ramp, get on I-5, or the off-ramp to the bathroom. And she was just sleeping there in the plum daylight, and then she had dyed blonde hair, and then there was garbage everywhere. Cups galore. I've never seen so much garbage, and clothing under that bridgeway. And then since then, somebody's cleaned up the trash, and that's a good thing, but it's going to cost the city more. And oh my, 5 minutes. Oh, and the parks, we got to keep the parks safe, because of needles and all that. And, that's so important. because we don't want to have the costs, taxpayers, that would be costly to dig up the ground and clean up the drug paraphernalia and all that if the homeless end up being in our parks. And another thing is, Ted Wheeler, he, has let the homeless go out of hand there, and folks that have lived there for years, they're moving out, and the town isn't the way it used to be. It's just awful. And the same for Seattle. And do we want that here? Just it can happen. It can happen here too. Lawlessness and police cutbacks eventually. I don't know what's on the agenda with the state of Oregon's agenda for the towns and cities here, because the state of Oregon follows California and Washington State and all the progressive liberal ways of life. And I feel like it's all destroying us. It's destroying us, what we've always known. And now people don't feel safe anymore. And, it's just really sad. And in the South Lane, we're putting taxpayers' money in the South Lane Behavior Health. And they have, I stated this before in a meeting, that they have the videos, this is a safe way to put needles in you, to put drugs in you. This is a safe way. We care about you. And then they give free needles out, and this is enabling drug users. Is that the moral thing to do in our town? We got to think of moral values. And thank you for listening. And Merry Christmas to everybody later, real soon in the future. Bye.
Okay, so I'm thinking that the homeless that people are writing down is an action item. If I'm mistaken, let me know and I'll have you speak on the non-agenda. Butch Gabrielson, Crescent Trees.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you. Let's see, a few years back, quite a few years back, I own a property for county starts on the street. When they did the hammerhead turnaround there for that development, they had 8 to 10 quite large trees there. The contractor kind of refused to do it. City assumed responsibility. Trees cut all the taproots on both sides. It went along for a while. I came down to the city every once in a while to talk to them. They started dying. I didn't get too excited until my insurance company told me they wanted to insure the house instead of the trees were taken. So back down at City Hall I come. We met out there and took the trees out. Then the city wanted to do a wraparound by the right of way, the gateway. I call it, they already own half. So we kind of put together a tentative deal. And then they gave me the paperwork on a Friday afternoon, and you voted on it on Monday. I read it over. I wanted right away to the new street. And this is verbal, of course. The written part is cast in stone. So I refused. I wrote him a letter, and then I found out the drain field for the house, part of it was on that 50 feet. So I refused the deal. Now that was over a year ago. I haven't heard from him at all. And you people, some of you voted on it and approved it. I think you think that it's already been taken care of, but it's not. That's one thing I don't like about the city here is I kind of got blindsided. They said staff read it over or changed it. And I thought we were proceeding right along until that. But I still don't like it about about half a dozen other politicians with the city on names around my properties in town. So I'm just going to throw one at you and look, see what happens.
Thank you. Dwayne Taddy.
Dwayne Jaddy, 77561, Highway 99, Cottage Grove, unincorporated Cottage Grove. Dwayne Taddy, 77561, Highway 99, Cottage Grove, unincorporated city resident. I was a city resident for 20 years prior to that, and have lots of experience with this body here. I won't stop caring. I live outside the city limits now. I won't stop caring. I won't stop loving Cottage Grove. I don't give up easily, if at all. Those that know me know that to be true. I just wanted to add to Butch's deal. I know Butch's situation. I had a similar situation that cost me $900 out of pocket for a tree that was supposed to be taken care of by the city, that was in a city memorandum, a letter that came to my house, and I ended up having to pay for it. Butch's trees, basically, if you don't understand, Butch's trees were killed by work that the city did. The city said we're not taking fault. Later on, several years later, the city makes them a deal to buy some property from them to extend Gateway, and they come into my 5 minutes, and they in the meantime they said, well, we'll pay you for the trees too. And then he says, I want a driveway, I want access to Gateway because you just devalued my property. City says no. His people say, hey, don't make the deal because you got a drain field that goes under Gateway. You're gonna have to rebuild that. They're gonna pay you $80,000 now. They're gonna get it back nickel and dime you. So you guys up here, please pay attention. Pay attention to the people that speak here. And so I'm gonna add something about that. It's really why I wanted to speak. I'm going to read you something from an author. His books have a crafty way of teaching children invaluable life lessons. And if you think about it, a lot of us have carried or should carry these lessons into our adulthood. I know I have. Although there's always a layer of silliness in this author's stories, there was often a strong morale to take away too. And we're going to go through one. Let's learn a few lessons. So this one is Dr. Seuss's Book of Colors, Mayor. Dr. Seuss's Book of Colors. Mayor and council, you can see yellow, you can see blue, you can see other colors too. Green eggs, green ham, red hat on Sam I am. Blue turtles, gray rock, green bird on pink clock. Red stripes, red tie, green book, blue sky. Orange duck, blue goo, green grass, pink shoe. You'll be all right, Cameron. Brown suit, brown hat, green umbrella with a pink mat. Orange nink, green sink, yellow yink, pink drink. Yellow truck with purple pots, a brown beast with white spots. Red fox, blue socks, yellow knocks in orange box. Purple fish in orange tree, blue wings on yellow bee. Brown camel, pink wall. Seriously though, red bat, blue ball. Yellow chicks, orange blocks. Brown bricks, blue clocks. Red clothes, blue hair. Imagine that. Gray hat, green chair. Yellow sneetch, green star. Purple jelly in a jar. Blue hoses, pink roses, brown owl on noses. And Mayor, the most important part of this page, when I look around this room, walking in, sitting in my car, watching people walk in, looking up here at the council and seeing the variety of folks and knowing the city staff, many of them by name. And yeah, some of them giving me hugs. I'll tell you, this last page right here, right side up or upside down, color, all around. I'm going to speak on 2 agenda items later if you'll allow me to, but it'll make more sense later. So thanks for letting me have the time up here to read that to y'all. Thank you.
Thanks. Bill Christensen.
Bill Christensen, 1337 Elm Avenue, Cottage Grove, 97424. I just wanted to talk about our new mayor. I've gotten to know her over the past year or so, and I want to say something about respect. Respect is earned. It's not forced. It's not demanded. Your respect is earned by your behavior. And I haven't known her very long, but I have the absolute utmost respect for Candace Soulsby. To me, she's an honest person. She cares more about people than I do. And she's just an amazing person. And I helped to get her elected as well as others. And I hope that that she earns your respect and that you earn her respect, because she is a worthy candidate for mayor, and I'm glad she's mayor. There's one more thing I want to say. I would like the city council to recommend that when Richard Myers comes into the city chambers and takes his seat, that he faces the people of Cottage Grove rather than have his back to the people of Cottage Grove. I'm sure there's a reason for him sitting there, but you know what? Every time he comes in, he never faces the people that are in this chamber. And I would like him to face the people of Cottage Grove. Thank you.
Okay, everybody else I have is signed up on agenda items. So it brings us to item 5, public hearings. Ordinance to vacate 198 square feet of right-of-way. Mr. Mongan.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. The proposed vacation of right-of-way we're discussing this evening under public hearing was initiated by staff when it was discovered in the course of the Safe Routes to School and/or Fillmore Stormwater Quality Project that a portion of the infrastructure of East Fillmore Avenue was on private property and not within the platted right-of-way. This finding led to the consideration of a vacation of right-of-way and subsequent dedication of right-of-way to the city that would ensure that all public infrastructure, that being storm sewer lines, a manhole, and sidewalks, curb and gutter, would lie within the public right-of-way of East Fillmore Avenue. City staff worked with the property owner, Resurrection Life Church, to identify the areas of vacation and the areas of dedication. The proposed area of dedicated right-of-way in exchange for the vacated area is 502 square feet. The Resurrection Life Church has agreed to the land exchange, that being 198 square feet of vacated right-of-way in exchange for 502 feet of dedicated right-of-way to the city of Cottage Grove, as shown in the attached Exhibit B. The purpose of this public hearing is to receive comment on the proposed vacation of 198 square feet of right-of-way located at the southeast corner of the intersection of South 7th Street and East Fillmore Avenue. It is now appropriate that council hold the public hearing on the draft ordinance.
This time I'll open the hearing. Anyone wish to speak? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing. Brings us to item 6, consent agenda.
Move approval.
Second.
Have a motion with a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Item 7, resolution and ordinances. Item A is a contract for body worn cameras. Chief Growth.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor-elect, members of council. Thank you for the time tonight. You have before you a resolution to authorize a contract for body-worn cameras and related safety equipment. I'm just going to hit the highlights of the memo you have before you. But body-worn camera programs and body-worn cameras should become an industry standard, a commonplace throughout Oregon policing. As you know, I started serving Cottage Grove the 1st of August. And one of the first things I noticed was the lack of body-worn cameras. I was surprised by that. So that's when it became a priority. I think it's important that Oregon policing, including Cottage Grove, utilize the technology available to them. And so we've had other incidents since that time, including the arrest on September 1st, where body-worn cameras would have been invaluable to document evidence and activities in that arrest. We've also had several other incidents since then. We had a critical incident involving stabbing just a few weeks ago. Body-worn cameras, again, would have been invaluable to document the scene, the actions of the officers and the investigators while they were there. So, again, they're just invaluable. There's lots of vendors out here, but the vendor that is before you with this contract is one that can provide not only the cameras, but also the cloud-based digital storage. It's CJIS certified, upgraded taser equipment. It's a very robust program. And frankly, a vendor that is used throughout the state of Oregon. Excuse me. So the contract before you tonight is for a 5-year contract. It's what they refer to as a bundled option. And by utilizing the 5-year bundled program, there's actually savings if you were to go out and get the items individually. This was not budgeted specifically for body-worn cameras. However, there are funds in this current budget in the narcotics fund, which can be used. They're specifically set aside for law enforcement equipment and safety equipment, and certainly the body-worn cameras fall under that. So the first year of the contract will be covered, and then we'll simply budget for the remaining years of the contract. So just really a quick oversight of what the contract provides: 15 cameras and uniform mounts, all the docking stations, excuse me, for charging and uploading the data. That includes what they refer to as signal sidearm devices that are attached to the holster. So when a firearm is drawn from the holster, the camera automatically activates, which is obviously a great piece of technology. Full 5-year warranty on all devices. All the associated necessary licensing and software for the devices, including live streaming, GPS location information for officer safety, redaction tools, and all the stuff we need to manage the data. This includes, as I mentioned, cloud-based CJIS certified storage, which is really critical. I mean, there's only a couple ways to store this kind of data. You either store it in-house on servers, which are very expensive, and then managing those servers becomes a huge drain on staff resources. And in communications I had in August with the city's IT team, they were not at all interested in trying to manage physically located servers to store all this data. So the cloud-based is the way to go. It's all CJIS certified, which means it's completely secure and encrypted and protected. Equipment refresh is included in the contract. So at 30 and 60-month intervals, our vendor will send us brand new cameras, their latest version, free, just part of the contract. And then if they come up with any other upgrades, we'll get those as well. And it includes professional services, on-site support, configuration and training, and then 15 TASER 7 CED devices. So officers are currently carrying tasers, but they're carrying an older model. The TASER 7 is only available through this bundled program. It's something the vendor reserves for these kinds of agreements. And so that's included in the deal. So they'll also ship us brand new tasers. So your officers will also be equipped with the latest taser model as well. So as I said, very robust contract. I think, again, this is the way to go. This has been a priority of mine since I've been here to get a program in place. I've gotten some support from various community members, and the officers support this. So staff respectfully recommends that you approve the resolution and contract. Happy to answer any questions if you have.
Good number.
2083.
I have Johanna Z signed up to speak on this.
Odyssey, 125 North 12th Street, Cottage Grove. Thank you so much. My allergies are acting up, so I apologize. So thank you, Mayor Gowing, for recognizing me. I love that we're moving forward on this. I know that I've discussed various models with Chief Shepherd over the past year, and other members here have also discussed the body cams with him. It's always been, it hasn't been in the budget, so I'm really glad that now the money's been there and it's come forward. So thank you for hearing the public on this. My concerns regarding the 5-year, the current plan that the public only heard of a few days ago is that it's a large expenditure. Yes, it's over 5 years for a service and product that has actually been decreasing in price over years. You know, one of the issues we had, right, that it was just way too expensive to do this. But so to commit to a 5-year contract to only save maybe $7,000, I'm just wondering if that's the wisest expenditure of taxpayer dollars. Again, really excited that body cams, you know, we've all, I think, called for them. So I noticed that, you know, everything's kind of an upgrade. The body cams are actually pretty high end, almost $700, I think. I was hard pressed to find anything online for police body cams over $400. So reminds me a little bit of that $10,000 toilet like at the White House. You know, I just thought that, wonder if there's a special model or something. So this isn't my area of expertise, and maybe the interim chief can answer these questions, but it makes sense that, you know, if next year perhaps the cost goes down for the services, that it would actually save if we just took a 1 to 2 year contract and see how it goes, see how the new products go, see how the service goes. But when you put yourself into a 5-year contract, you're kind of stuck. So I don't know what your options are, you know, with that. And then I just had a question on the privacy. Where is it stored and who has access to it? Because it's a contract with the controversial League of Oregon Cities, which I know that Jake Boone's been a part of, and now Councilor Savage, congratulations, you're on the board of directors of League of Oregon Cities. So the connection between those organizations, I just had kind of a bit of a question about. And I think that was it, just some things to think about and ponder, and appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Urban.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Interim Chief. These can be difficult decisions to make. I'm in full support of body cams and accountability both ways for our police and for residents. I think time is of the essence. So if I were doing the calculus of I would go with what was easily implementable probably right away. I would recognize that there's a premium to that. But I would also hope that we would be vigilant in the renewal process and ahead of time, making sure that we can make adjustments, maybe come renewal period. To that end, my question is, if it's a 5-year renewal period, do we know when the contract has to be re-upped in order to have continuation of services so that we can target a time and ahead of that time for thorough research of alternative products?
So obviously I can't give you a date specific, but I would say probably within 6 months of the end of the contract is when we would start having conversations about, are we going to continue the contract? And of course, I won't be here, but I mean, that's generally, I would give you an educated guess that would probably be the timeline when those conversations would take place. Having implemented contracts like this in the past, that's kind of how we would approach it. We did approach it.
A follow-up to that is, I would assume that you would have communication with other departments of similar size. What was the vetting process in this vendor selection process? And what were the considerations that this felt like the highest value vendor for Cottage Grove right now?
So this vendor serves approximately 32 cities that are comparable in size to Cottage Grove. Obviously, some are smaller, some are larger, but that's comparable. And in the memo, but for the record and those listening, some of those cities include Tillamook, Sherwood, Tiger, Tualatin, Grants Pass, Central Point, Phoenix, Talent, Rogue River, Medford, Bend, Springfield, Corvallis, and Roseburg. And obviously, that's not even close to 32. And 32 isn't the total number of cities that this contract vendor serves, but those are the ones that they said provided to me that was comparable. I don't know what the total number is. I was told it was significantly more than 32. So the vetting process had to, a couple phases, and honestly, the first phase is I'm very familiar with this vendor. You saw Sherwood in there. I was the chief in Sherwood for 14 years, and we had a contract with Axon. Absolutely tremendous response and tremendous service. It is a top of the line product, and what the contract avails you is everything you need and then some. And not to come across correctly, excuse me, but the savings, the 7198, that's annual. So over the course of the 5-year contract, that's basically another year of savings by taking the bundle approach. So I just wanted to clarify that. And then whenever you do a purchase like this, you obviously have to follow state law and you have to follow Cottage Grove's purchasing guidelines. So I worked with our city attorney to make sure I was up to speed on Cottage Grove's purchasing guidelines. Discovered that there was a piggyback contract that was out there through the League of Oregon Cities. And so basically what that means is when you locate a piggyback, it's a cooperative purchasing agreement. We refer to them as piggyback because you get to piggyback on an existing contract. Anytime cities are able to do that, depending on the circumstances, it can be a huge plus because now we've saved all the staff time and all the research that goes into that entire purchasing process and bids and all of that. And frankly, it's a boon for the city because you've saved that money. The contract's already been vetted, everything's laid out, and you just take advantage of that contract. Again, I have experience in doing with that. That experience has been positive. And so this was a great opportunity for us to avail ourselves of that. And as I alluded to, but I just want to be clear, it all went through the city attorney's office to make sure that everything was at. So that's to answer your question, Councilor Irvin. That's kind of the vetting process that went through. I wasn't necessarily looking for the fastest option per se, but it was a priority. I wanted to get these implemented soon. The sooner we get the contract means, we now have all the setup process and all the training and all that. And that can't start until we have a contract in place. So as I said, I wasn't looking for necessarily the quickest option. What I was looking for was a very good option for the community and the city. And I think this is, in my professional opinion, as good of an option as you're going to find. There's very few vendors that I'm aware of, and I can't think of one now that offers everything you need to run a body-worn camera program. It's very difficult for a vendor to have cameras and cloud-based storage and all that. And sometimes they may say, well, yeah, we can do that. But then what you find out is they have a subcontract with somebody else to provide the cloud-based storage. This is all through one vendor. And again, in my professional opinion, this vendor happens to be as good as it is. So I hope that answers your question.
Councilor Savage.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. I had a couple of questions, but you kind of already answered one. Have you used this program before? So it sounds like you do have experience with this program. You mentioned Sherwood. I spent some time with the mayor of Sherwood last week, as you and I were talking about earlier, and he was telling me that when you started there 14 years ago, they were really needing somebody to help turn their department around, and you did that. And I'm thrilled to see what kind of good morale you can put back into this department. I think that we're on the right track. I'm eager to take this recommendation. I did have another question about the security of the cloud. When I was at one of the conferences that I went to probably a month ago now, they were mentioning that small cities are a really good and easy target for hackers. And that makes me hyper aware as we are going into this digital era. And here we are storing in a cloud-based system. Does this come with the security for that as well?
Yes, so you're right. I think all cities are ripe for that if they're not, if they aren't taking care of things like they should. But so let me talk a little bit about that CJIS compliant, what that means, because I've mentioned it a couple times. So CJIS is an acronym, CJIS, Criminal Justice Information System. And that is basically everything that is related to any piece of information, any piece of data that's related to criminal justice. It's highly sensitive, it's highly protected, it's protected by federal code and state law. It can't be accessed by somebody that doesn't have permission. So, for example, if somebody came in and said, we'd like a copy of the police report, a lot of the information on that report would be redacted if it was considered criminal justice information and something that the public otherwise wouldn't have access to. So, in order for a system to get for example, this cloud storage system to be CJIS compliant, they have to go through all of the CJIS security, all of the security, and all the testing to hit that compliance, right? So a simple analogy would be police departments have to be CJIS compliant. We go through LEDS audits to make sure that we're protecting law enforcement data systems and we're all CJIS compliant. So your IT department has to have a completely different, much more stringent set of rules for the police department and all the information that it shares and navigates than it does for the rest of the city. So that security is accomplished by that CJIS compliance. And it's at an entirely different level. Like, we're not talking about antivirus security and all that that you have in your computer. We're talking way beyond that. The data is encrypted, it's protected, and it's just about as high a level of security as you can get. Maybe the only thing higher would be some levels of military security. I don't know, but it's pretty high.
Thank you so much. And I have one final question, and I apologize if this has already been asked. I was not here on Friday to ask this. If we were to say, okay, yes, this sounds great, we're going to start today, and the ball gets rolling. I understand that there's purchasing time and there's training time, but what is the general time frame that this can actually be implemented? What is the forecast?
My hope is that we'd have cameras on the street in a couple of months. So obviously the wild card, we all love the holidays, but the holidays are a wild card, right? So there's going to be some interruption here coming for all of us. But I would hope that by the end of February, we'd have some cameras on the street. There's going to be, the policy's already in place. That's usually a heavy lift for some agencies. We're fortunate in that we have Lexipol. It's a great policy system, and it already has the policy in place. So now the training, we need to teach folks how to operate the system. We need to get all the equipment in, the storage banks all set up and all that taken care of. But that's not a huge lift. So part to stay on until the contact is broken. So that's going to take a learning curve, right? Everybody's going to get kind of into the habit of doing that. But it's really not an issue that, oops, I turned my camera on by mistake. The storage we have is unlimited. So that's another benefit of this program is they're not going to call and say, hey, you're almost out of storage. It's unlimited storage. So, but that's how the cameras work.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Councilor Fleck.
Mr. Mayor, and thank you all for all those good questions. You pretty much answered anything I possibly could have come up with. Mr. Mayor, move that resolution 2083 be adopted.
I'll second.
I have a motion with a second. Is there more discussion? Councilor Stennett?
Chief, I asked about this on Friday. I wouldn't want to belabor the point as such, but I wondered if you could just kind of touch on what the taser upgrade means for our officers.
Sure. So since the inception of the taser, there's obviously been several models. And are we on XP right now, Sergeant? You know, X26. So trying to remember the different iterations. And so any agency has the ability to choose or not to choose to use tasers. And you also have the ability to choose whether or not you're going to upgrade, right? So every time they issue an upgraded taser, then that really you have to say, oh, we want to go with that, and you have to buy them. And in this contract, those are provided. So I can't get into the specifics of the difference between the Taser 7, which we're going to get, and the Taser XP. I don't know as much about the uniqueness of each model. What I know is that the Taser 7 is their newest model. Like there is no newer model than that one. And so as a part of this bundle contract, they're providing those to us because we don't already have them.
So we retain the option to upgrade with the tasers as well.
Say that again.
Will we have the option to upgrade the tasers as well?
Yes. Were they to inside of that 5 years come out with a new model, that would be an upgrade that's included with it. But
Great.
They don't come out with new taser models near as often as they do with upgraded cameras, right? I mean,
Sure.
We all know, 1 year difference between a smartphone is the difference between 12 megapixel and 17 megapixel. So, I mean, the camera technology upgrades much more.
Sure.
Frequent.
Thank you for prioritizing this. Appreciate that.
Councilor Irvin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Some of your questions sparked more questions for me, as they do the policy regarding on-off. I imagine we don't have a policy specific to body cams. Maybe there's one for the cameras in the police vehicles. Where does this policy come from? Is it drafted by the police department? Does it come with the contract? How does that work? How can
we actually do have a policy. So our police department policy manual comes from Lexipol, and it's a policy system. And what that means is, this is kind of a separate topic, but what it means is that system too is constantly updated. New policies are issued anytime case law or a new law goes into effect in Oregon. It's a specific Oregon policy manual. Lexipol is a vendor that is throughout the nation, but they have specific Oregon policy products that are vetted by Oregon subject matter experts. So when the Oregon legislature passes a law, those folks are on it immediately, and they get that plugged into policy, and it's also vetted by a whole host of staff attorneys that they employ to make sure. Obviously, if you're providing a policy system, you can't afford to be wrong, right? Because you're going to go out of business really quick. So they have quite the staff that does that. Well, Lexipol has what they refer to as a mobile audio video, anyway, MAV, but policy that covers in-car cameras, body-worn cameras. They also have policies that cover voice recorders. So, as I mentioned, the policy is already in place. We don't have to do that. To answer your question about who drafts a policy, Lexipol does. We don't. Now, we can make adjustments to policy if it's a specific Cottage Grove thing, but those adjustments are pretty rare. We tend to go with the content that they provide. But, for example, they may provide policy on, well, actually, I can't come up with an example, but in other police departments, we didn't have our own dispatch, so that was not a policy that necessarily applied. We do here, but so anyway, to answer your question, yeah, the policy's already drafted in place. So
Appreciate that. Any other discussion? Seeing none, will the recorder please call the roll?
Counselor Solzberg.
Here.
Counselor Savage.
Aye.
Youth Representative.
Aye.
Mike Fleck.
Aye. Or Counselor Fleck, either or. Aye.
Counselor Stan.
Aye.
Counselor Irvin.
Aye.
Counselor Roberts.
Aye.
Mayor Young.
Aye. So resolution 2083 passes. Brings us to item B. City Council adopts a resolution for a joint grant management agreement between the City of Cottage Grove and Bohemia Foundation. Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, Council. So on September 16th, 2022, the Economic Development Administration, commonly referred to as the EDA, approved a $1,097,807 grant to the Bohemia Foundation for the Bohemia Park Entry Plaza improvements. City staff has been diligently working to complete specific award conditions, which are referred to as SACs, required by the EDA for the grant. This specific item is for the specific award condition number 25. There's a requirement by EDA to have a joint grant management agreement between the city and the Bohemia Foundation. Legal counsel has prepared the joint grant management agreement, and the EDA project manager has reviewed the agreement before adoption for consideration this evening by the city and the Bohemia Foundation. The Bohemia Foundation Board of Directors has approved the resolution of the joint management agreement. And so once the City Council approves the agreement, we will submit this item to EDA, hopefully completing their request for SAC number 25. So the recommendation is for the council to adopt the resolution approving the joint grant management agreement for the EDA grant award number 07-79-079. We'll just share too in the grant agreement. It really pretty much is the city staff, the current staff that's managing the Main Street grant will be the same staff managing this grant. It was encouraged by the EDA that we do that so that there's consistent people to work with and easier for us to get through the details of the projects and get them completed.
2084. Councilor Fleck.
Well, I am super excited to see this project go forward, and great job all. And with that, I move that the council adopt resolution 2084.
Second. I have a motion with a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the recorder please call the roll?
Counselor Savage.
Aye.
Youth Representative. Aye. Counselor Fleck.
Aye.
Counselor Stan.
Aye.
Counselor Irvin.
Aye.
Counselor Roberts.
Aye.
Mayor Young.
Aye.
Counselor Solzberg.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so resolution 2084 passes, brings us to item C, resolution appealing resolution 1865, adopting new council procedure rules. Mr. Myers.
So you have before you a draft resolution that's been prepared based on the existing council rules with changes that the Rules Committee has proposed for the council to consider this evening. You have a plain version of the existing rules as well as a markup of what the edits and changes would be from the revised rules.
Councilor Soulsby.
I would propose that we postpone voting on this until we have our new council in place. We're in a lame duck session right now, and when we first went into this, I thought it was going to be because we were doing the Zoom and a lot of stuff online, and I thought it was going to be some minimal changes. And when I get all the red marks on these new changes, I think it is only fitting that we're changing 3 positions on this council. And I think it's only fitting that the new council members have a say on the rules that we are all going to be abiding by. And as the mayor-elect going in, I'd much rather be the mayor voting on the new rules. So with that, I would like to make a motion that we postpone this.
We have a point of order. Do we hear public comment first?
We can.
You can do.
We have a lot of public signed up on this.
Let's listen.
Okay, so we'll start with Feather Bousted.
Honorable Mayor Dowling, I want to honor you for your service to the city of Cottage Grove and for your leadership at the state level. I look forward to the legislation that you worked hard on, and it's to see it coming forth in the next session. I want to acknowledge your sacrifice and your hard work on our behalf. May there be lasting fruit and rich reward for you as you see that fruit come from the good seeds that you planted here in our community. God bless you in your next endeavor. I hope to see you again in some kind of whatever you want to be doing next. Addressing the council meeting procedural revisions, some truths that I see. Efficient meetings. No people involved sure makes a nice clean meeting. And why do we want efficient meetings? These meetings are to run the city. And what is the city? Is it the infrastructure, roads? Is it building codes, budgets, police safety? Is it boundaries or ordinances, bonds? If you have all the answers to run the city with the manager and don't need or want the mess of people involved, then definitely vote yes on the procedural changes. If a city instead is a community first that must also deal with infrastructure and all the rest second, then consider this truth. The higher the buy-in and the investment from the group, the higher the success in anything we try and do. There is wisdom in a multitude of counselors. Ruling is more efficient in the short run, like China. The biggest successes for the lasting social changes come with the more arduous path of including the dissenters. Allowances must be made for the longer process of creating community. Its model is closer to family and families. I see good things happening. The people of Cottage Grove are waking up and wanting to be involved with how we run this city, desiring to be aware of what is being decided, who's making the decisions, and how we are making those decisions. People are becoming aware. We're showing up. Good us. Yes, it's messy. Look at good us. It is messy, but please have faith. Have faith. We will make it through this chaos to the other side where the better decisions are made for the city. And because it's an up-close social issue, the homeless, we must push through the chaos to the broader collaborative decision-making. I encourage you, Mayor and City Councilors, to please vote no on these meeting procedural revisions, at least for now. I see these revisions contributing to a more distant relationship between us with the perception of ruling instead of governing. I propose we create a closer bond between the City Council and the community. That bond, by the way, is representatives representing or represented. I would like to see us hold bi-monthly, that means like every other month, meetings with an open format. This is just one idea. To have more dialogue together about these, especially these social issues. We can manage with good facilitation a real town hall. Then we can make this city what we want to live in together. Thank you.
Johanna Z.
So thank you, Mayor Gowing, for recognizing me again. So in this proposal, I heard and appreciate the request for more decorum. That's wonderful. I don't have enough time to go point by point on this proposal. It's quite complex and addresses many issues that affect both the privacy of the citizens of Cottage Grove and the ability to share publicly our concerns regarding changes to government policy and issues that affect our everyday lives. It has the general feeling, in some cases, the language of lockdown, restriction, and censoring. I speak for many when I say that these proposals are a violation of our First Amendment rights. Oregon public meeting laws, which Cottage Grove is to adhere to, states that public meetings are for the public. The city has several ways in which they can conduct their business without public comment. Work sessions, executive sessions, agenda sessions, regular sessions are a time to be heard by the city officials. Many people are not able to get online or meet in person. I'm sure many of you would not want to hear from me every week to have a private meeting, so this is my time to see you guys. The public meeting is the place and time for them to express themselves. They can hear the staff report or proposal, and council members can hear from their constituents. So I encourage you to spend more time hashing out the legalities of these proposed changes. Section 11, you're telling people they cannot repeat what someone else says. Do you all remember when the idea of the M Street property was considered and about 12 people showed up and they all shared pretty much the same thing, though each person had a very personal, heartfelt concern that they needed to share because it affected them so deeply. If you were to deny that, which these proposed changes do, how would you know the impact it would have on them and what your constituents wanted? So yes, there are other ways they can communicate, but they chose that way to show up in the community. And it was effective. To deny this would cut off their voice. I do believe that many people want to speak after they've heard a staff report, but currently cannot because they did not sign up. I would like to see that opened up. Many people want to share. This meeting should be for all of us as a community. And as a community, we learn to be efficient and effective together, not because of strict rules, but because we understand the need to get business done. 22.2, the city can shut down any video at any time for a violation. I consider a warning. I remember that happened to me in the beginning. Mayor Gowing, you remembered to mute me, but they just cut me off completely just because I said one thing. So 24.2, council members should refrain from actions benefiting any individual or special interest group at the expense of the city. And I'm really concerned about who gets to interpret that, right? What's considered a special interest group. Section 24, council members themselves will be forced to give up all privacy and have to be an agent of the city. It sounds very harsh. It kind of reminds me of that Hail Hitler, that if you did not do it and go along with it, well, that's going to be trouble for you guys. So the proposed section 28 is titled censure. The council has the right to investigate the actions of any member of the council. I don't even have to say anything about that one. 28.3, a majority of council may remove a council member from office for attempting to directly or indirectly coerce the city manager or candidate for the office of manager in the appointment or removal of any city employee or in administrative decisions regarding city property or contracts. This feels pretty harsh, controlling, and again, whose interpretation is this left up to? I mean, today we heard an outburst from the city manager towards our citizen Cameron here. And if you were watching online, you could actually see the very physical, visceral response that he had to that attack. And I do hope that, Mr. Myers makes good on that. I understand completely why he would direct his anger at the caller, but I was confused as to why it was at Cameron. So we have to have more clear language as to define what does coercion mean so that someone on a whim cannot go after someone who doesn't agree with their ideology. I mean, this protects everyone. So thank you. I encourage you to spend more time with this. Speak to a different attorney who doesn't have an involvement, history, or relationship with city staff. I think that's pretty important. Thank you so much.
Amber Baylor.
Good evening. My name is Amber Baylor. I'm at 640 Lincoln Avenue, Cottage Grove. I'm here representing my husband, my 2 sons, and myself. After reading the city charter and the red lines of the procedural rule changes, I have some concerns. And I mostly have concerns with the potential for limiting our First Amendment right to speech. First off, when reading the changes, I assumed all the suggested changes were with the citizens of Cottage Grove's best interest in mind. My perspective of the rule changes is informed by the U.S. Constitution, which all council members have sworn to support. On the whole, it appears the goal is more efficient and shorter council meetings, but is this end more important than public input and engagement with the very people they elected and the public employees for whom their salaries are paid by our tax dollars? I'd say no. Of the proposed changes, there are a number that I appeal to you, council members, do not approve. They are as follows. 9.3. This limits the ability of a council member, let's say one that represents a minority view on the council, from having a topic raised before the public, since it is at the discretion of the city manager's approval. If this council member has an agenda item that is of high importance to his or her constituents, but not of high importance to the majority, this person, and therefore the citizens' ability to have an opportunity for public engagement with elected officials, is severely hampered. Item number 11. Language is inserted which compresses the total amount of time for interested citizens to speak. Both on and off agenda items are limited to 30 minutes. It does not allow for what's already occurred here. This person, and therefore the citizens' ability to, This rule reduces the time of freedom of speech to engage with their elected officials and city manager. This also limits the ability for people to express opposing viewpoints to a comment expressed on a topic, therefore limiting the free exchange of supporting and dissenting views. Additional limitations are imposed on citizens to engage with the public and elected officials by requiring signing up to speak in advance. These seem to be unnecessary restrictions on free speech, given the city has operated without this rule for 7 years, at least. Item number 14, removing the opportunity for additional public comments after the staff report. This forces comments on a shorter duration period prior to even hearing the staff report on the items that they may want to discuss. Not everyone is informed enough to comment without hearing more on the subject during the council meeting. Item number 15, this again reduces the opportunity for public comment on something that is usually a direct impact on citizens, an ordinance. This means an ordinance could be passed without any opportunity for public comment in a council meeting forum. Item 21, presiding officer decides who will speak from the list of those who signed up in advance of the meeting. This allows personal bias in the selection of whom the council and public hears from. 22.1.1, a citizen being removed from the meeting for not referring to a person by proper title. Sorry, that just ahead of me. Not everyone knows the precise title of every person whom they're addressing, not even the corporate one. Item 22.2.1, my comments from 11 apply here. 23, this is unnecessary. We really just literally went through a pandemic without these procedure rules in place. 24.3 or 24.5, this is sounding like compelled speech, resulting in forcing a council member to speak about things with which they disagree in order to exercise their freedom of speech on an opinion. An alternative is to suggest that council member preface their speech and say, this is my opinion and not necessarily that of the city of Cottage Grove. Item 24.7 seems to be an overreach and restricting private citizens, council members' right to free speech. 24.8, can a private citizen, specifically a council member, be forced to comply with city policy, which is applicable to city employees? I'd say no. Where is that policy? Shouldn't it be available for review before approval of these rules? Lastly, 28, unclear why this is necessary now and not 7 years ago. Depending on the circumstance, there's the opportunity for the council, majority of council members, to conduct investigations into private citizens, council members, remove and censor them without due process. The majority could far more easily abuse power to oust people in the council they aren't aligned with. So these are my concerns. I hope you guys postpone your votes. Please vote against these. Have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a Jeff. I can't make out the last name, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. I also am rising to speak in opposition of the proposed rule changes. I certainly can't do a better job than the previous eloquent speaker. But I'd like to just set context. We, the people, form a government, and we elect our elected representatives, who then hire city managers, who then hire people to do the day-to-day work, all accountable back to the citizen. The proposed rule changes wasn't clear to me at all why we were making this change. I had to guess. And then I started to see some themes. And frankly, they were very concerning. Reducing the citizens' access to you, 5 minutes down to 3 minutes. You could say, well, we get to hear more people. Okay, great. We'll be more efficient in our speech. That's good. Having to sign up on a list. Okay, I can understand that. Having the city manager and the mayor decide who gets to speak and who doesn't get to speak, and not have a public view of who isn't being allowed to speak, that's of concern to me. It's kind of elevating the city manager to a co-equal with the council. And the city manager works for the council and shouldn't be a co-equal in decision-making about what is on the agenda or who gets to speak to the items. The idea that a council member can't dissent or express a view that's not the official policy of the council, that's abhorrent in a free society of representative democracy. Absolutely abhorrent. It's a foundational breach. Why would anyone think to compel a representative of the people to a speech? We can unelect somebody, elect somebody else. If we don't like how they conduct the business, if we don't like how they're representing us, we'll take care of that. That's the whole thing in a democracy. It's not for the council to police each other about the party line. That's abhorrent in a free society, okay? Investigating one another, having that intrusion on your lives, who would want to subject themselves to that? Who would want to step forward and be a leader in the community and serve their people? I mean, I really respect and honor all of you for being here and the time, and devotion and sacrifice. It's very inspiring. Who would want to subject themselves to that? It's beyond me. So when I ask myself, what problem are we trying to solve with these changes? What is the goal or aim? I come up with my themes, and it's not a good result, because the goal should be encouraging free speech, encouraging a dialogue. Yes, it's messy, as others have pointed out. That's the beauty of democracy, that if you allow people to speak, for one thing, it soothes the individual's anxieties and emotions, against oppression, which is very important in democracy. You can let people speak or you can oppress them. You have to let them speak. And this is at a city council level and a school board. That's the only place citizens in the United States get a chance to speak to their government. A constitutionally protected right to address their government. We can't do it in DC. We can't do it in Salem. It's here. And you guys should be trying to expand that, as the other speakers have said, to fulfill your duty to the Constitution. So I won't repeat myself, because that would be a violation of the proposed rules. But thank you for listening, and I honor your service to this community.
Thank you. Dwayne Taddy. Let's keep the clapping down.
Dwayne Daddy 77561 Highway 99. I don't got nothing else to say on that. I was going to go through these proposed changes. It is quite confusing, and served on the budget committee, I know how it feels to get a booklet that thick on Thursday or Friday and have to come to a meeting on Tuesday and figure it out. And you guys go to an agenda session, and of course your committee was yourself, Mayor, and two other counselors, Counselor Roberts and Counselor Fleck. you get this information to the council at an agenda session on a Friday, and here we are Monday, whatever day it is. I think it's Monday. I don't even know what day it is. I work nights on the railroad, so I don't know. But anyways, I don't think it's right. I think I'm with Counselor Soulsby. I think it should be postponed. I'd like to hear what Counselor Roberts has to say before I make a comment, but I know that that's not the process. One of the bigger issues on this, so I have a friend who compressed this into Google Docs, got rid of all the red marks and all the confusing parts and compressed it for me. And I've shared it with some folks, and I'd like to think some of you are here because you saw that. I'd like to think that some of the 40 folks online are here because they saw that. I'd like to think that I had an effect. You're essentially reducing one person down to 3 minutes. I've already spoke for 5 minutes, and going back to the book, Colors, the last speaker spoke on it. Everybody from all different walks of life, people with different education levels, people with prepared speeches, people who just talk, coming out of their head, here we go, and some people who have give this some thought. But to reduce each person down to 3 minutes total for the entire meeting, that seems wrong. What else can I add to this? If you guys vote on this, if the council votes on this tonight, I'm going to say two things. I'm going to ask that you vote it down. You vote no. What I'd like to see is it postponed. I don't think it's fair for an outgoing mayor, an outgoing councilor, and incoming councilor in Councilor Soulsby's seat to not have a part to play in this, in making history. I also think it's unfair for the folks that are outgoing, Councilor Roberts, Mayor Gowan, to have formed this in this committee and given it to the folks that are going to stick around and lead this city for the next couple of years. That's unfair. And I'm going to leave you with that.
Brad Pennington.
Ladies and gentlemen of the council, Mayor, not a lot left to say. I can beat a dead horse and say it all again. So, man, pretty sure that none of you get paid to be here. You're all volunteering your time. And when it comes to public service, I believe that you only do it for one of two things. Either you want to help your community or you want to further your own personal gain. So, according to this, whoever was involved in drafting it, I don't want to speak for them, but I can assume what they're doing. I can go over every single point that all these people have already done. Going down to 3 minutes, being able to turn off the videos if they don't have, ensure their background and dress is appropriate to the rest of the council. So if you don't like my t-shirt, you can just turn me off. It's too vague. There's way too many things in here that are just vague. You don't give any actual, these rules may be amended in the manner adopted by the council. Okay, so what is that? Go through the council's inherent right to make and enforce its own rules. Like, I can go through all the good things in here too. There are some things that should be in here. Look for one. Oh, don't make a lot loud, disruptive, and resistant. No. Everybody's pretty much gone over everything else. I implore you to please vote this down. Don't even wait, just say no. It just needs to be put away. And whoever really was involved in this, I don't think they should be employed by the city of Cottage. I think 25 years is probably long enough. So, thank you.
Brian Donner.
Bernie Donner.
Oh, sorry.
No worries.
And I think everything's been said, but I'll just keep it short. I think it's not fair for the council to do this aside at this time for this kind of situation. I think it's more the incoming that should decide it. I think you're all smart enough to figure it out.
Ryan Baylor. See him
Here.
online. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Ryan Baylor, 640 Lincoln Avenue here in Cottage Grove. I want to thank you all who have served the people of Cottage Grove for the good of the people and to protect their rights. After reading the city charter and all the proposed red lines of the procedural rules, I have a few concerns regarding the proposed changes that limit our First Amendment rights as citizens and for council members who are also private citizens as they are not city employees. It is concerning that if passed, the freedoms of private citizens and the vital time needed for public input and engagement would be significantly reduced, given that the proposal may have the intent to shorten the time of the meeting for convenience, but I, for one, am willing to endure the current time and rules allowed. Also, after reviewing previous meetings, many of these proposed changes seem to have already been used before they were approved, indicating that many of the elected officials may have not adhered to the current policies for the last few years, and in which significantly reduced the open exchange of ideas and concerns where the council members are to listen, consider, and discuss comments and concerns from private citizens. With that said, and with being aware of the local pushback against these proposals, I ask the council members to postpone and to not approve of the following. 9.3, this limits council members' ability to have an opportunity to public engagement with the elected officials if it is not important to the majority of other council members. 11 and also 22.2.1. These further limit the open exchange of ideas by reducing the time for a person to engage the elected officials and city manager, which is essential for us to express facts, views, and opinions. 14 removes the opportunity for additional public comments after the staff report. That's after the staff report, which is essential to know and understand before having a well-informed comment during the council meeting. 15 provides the ability for an ordinance to be passed without any opportunity for public comment in a council meeting. Very concerning. 21 gives power to the preceding officer to review who signed up in advance and decide who will speak, which allows the person's personal bias of whom a council and public hear from. This seems on 23 that very unnecessary as the pandemic is over. Therefore, these procedural rules are not logical. 24, once again, this is an overreach by restricting council members' First Amendment rights to speak as private citizens, which should not be allowed. They should be allowed to speak as private citizens, excuse me. In 28, it is kind of treading on hazardous waters here, as a majority of council members would have the ability to oust council members within the council that they are not aligned with, which supports a bias and not the open exchange of ideas. This proposal will give the majority of council members the ability to conduct investigations into the council members they disagree with, which would violate the rights of those council members. Therefore, if passed, the council would have the power to remove and censor council members without due process and without public input. So again, in closing, I ask that council members to postpone and of course to not approve of the items I have listed above, so that we can maintain a good and fair forum where the people of Cottage Grove are heard and represented well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Yvonne Miller.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. Thank you for taking the time to listen to all of us. This is very important for all of us to have our voices heard. This is why we have elected our council members to do this for us. They kind of help us to express our concerns, and by passing this, that's going to inhibit our voices. And the reason why I think most of us are fighting for this is because we don't want our voices to not be heard, and we want to stay protected. And not only does it protect us, but it helps protect you as citizens of this city as well, because you all won't always be in council positions or in the mayor's position. We need to be able to have the time for these issues to be brought forth, for our voices to be heard, for our council members to bring those forward. Otherwise, we've lost all democracy. I agree with a lot of the other folks and everything that they've said. They all have great points. I won't reiterate those. I do agree with the motion of postponing this for the incoming new councilors and mayor to decide on. Since they are not in the seat, they don't have a voice on something that's incoming, or just shoot it down because it's not right. Thank you.
Thank you. So this wasn't brought up just recently. This was brought up like a year and a half ago to review the rules, because we haven't reviewed the rules since 2014, and they should be done at least every 5 years. And so we're just trying to get it done. It's just this last year has been really hectic. Prior to the meeting, Councilor Fleck told me he was going to propose we postpone it because of just the way it went on the agenda session on Friday. So if I haven't mistaken, Councilor Solby made a motion to postpone it. Do we get a second?
Do we need a motion to postpone?
No.
I would say we could just postpone.
Okay.
If there's consensus.
I would like a work session and with the city attorney to go over these as a whole.
I'm happy to do that if there's a majority of the council interested in that, or could direct the city manager.
So I was actually going to propose that Councilor Urban, myself, and Mayor Soulsby-elect be part of a committee to go over, the concerns and bring it back. But I'm fine with the work session as well. So let me finish though. I'd like to delve in a little bit to where this came from and why. So one of the big issues for me has been about the public comment. I felt that over the last, I think it's been 4 or 6 years we've had this, it's confusing for most folks. They come to city council, they don't know when to speak, they don't know how the process works, and I find that it's been very confusing for most folks who are not used to public speaking. And obviously the folks in here have been doing this enough in the last year that they're very familiar now with the process, but that is not true for folks who don't come here regularly. And so this has been a problem. I also would like to point out that I just looked at our agenda items. There's a half an hour for folks to speak on items not on the agenda. There's a half an hour to speak on every item on the agenda, and there are 7. So right there, we're talking about 3 hours of potential public speaking. And oh wait, we have a public hearing, which could add another hour of public comment theoretically. So we would be here till 11 o'clock before any of the business of the city was attended to. And I see a lot of shrugs. But I guess the point is we do have business to do. And so there's a balance between getting that public input and being able to get business done. I fully support having work sessions if there's something of heavy interest. That is not, there's no intent here to limit public speech. I'm just saying to be able to get the rest of the business done, contracts passed, to get the budget passed, to get other critical things of our business, of the city done, I think there's a better way to do it. And I'm totally open to having discussions about how that is. But I think this format is wrong. And that was me. I brought that up. I'm certainly open to comment anytime. In fact, anytime I'm on the radio as camera test, I give you my home phone number and say, please call. I think that we don't sit up here unless we want that input. So I'm not suggesting that we limit the public input. I'm just saying there's probably a better way to do it. Many of the other things in here either already are. The repetitious comments, if you look, are in black. That is actually in our current code. we don't enforce it. In fact, I will point out to the clock right now, we've gone over half an hour on this item and nobody said point of order and shut down conversation. In fact, quite often people run over their 5 minutes and we don't shut down their conversation. So I hope that folks understand there's not any agenda here to stifle the public's input. That is not the role here. It's to balance the needs of the city in the process. Many of these other amendments are around state law that we have to do and have just been unspoken, but are in fact the rule of the land. Comments as a counselor, if somebody asked me about the homeless issue 6 months ago, and I said, well, the council is, supporting doing this. Well, clearly there were at least a couple of members of this council that did not. It would be wrong for me to say that the council supported that before that decision. And this is what we're saying, is that I, as a counselor, need to be careful to say, my opinion is that I support this, not that the council is. And in fact, I can say the council is undecided. I can say the council hasn't made a decision yet. I can say the council is split on this. What I have to be is factual. What we're looking for here are rules of conduct for each and every one of us to act in a manner that supports this body. We all, you and I, need to respect the body. We may get frustrated with each other. We may not always respect each other, but we need to respect the body. And the rules here are not designed to stifle conversation, but to make sure that it's managed in a way where everybody has their say and that there is decorum met. Because, as the clapping started a few minutes ago, I could have said point of order and made it really ugly and thrown people out of here, but that's not the goal. But if this room went into chaos and we couldn't get anything done, we'd have no other recourse. So there needs to be rules. I'm not saying we even have to enforce them every time. In fact, quite often we don't. I'm just saying that this was a first stab at it. We're certainly open to changing this. And as the mayor said, we've been going through this for months and months and wanted to bring this forward, and then months and months in the process of doing it. And I fully support bringing it forward to the next council. So whether it's a work session or another subcommittee, I totally support that. Thank you.
Keep it down. Councilor, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do support reworking this, finding something that works for the city and how we function and balance all the concerns that we have. I have a couple of points I do want to address, and that is I do want to know who came up with which changes and who proposed them. I know there was a committee that came, and Councilor Fleck has talked about the reasoning behind making changes to public comment and where it lies, and has presented those. I would really like to know the reasoning behind specifically and who proposed it on some of these other items. And maybe the reason why, and maybe there's some learning that we can all do here. So there's not a lot of ways for the public to get their voice through their elected officials, but one of them is this 9.3 that's been brought up. In my reading of the changed amendments, by any council member in a request, one of the avenues that an item can be brought up by any council member in a request to the city manager. So I understand that to mean that there's now a discretionary choice being exercised by the city manager as to whether or not an item can be added to an agenda or not, which is approved by the mayor, parentheses, as applicable. So once again, discretion as to whether or not it's applicable for the mayor to be part of it. And then an operator of the word and. So it must be both. It's not or. On the radio this morning, it was said that it was or. It's actually not or, because or would be either one of the two deciding that it would be okay, would allow an item to be permitted, but it's which is approved by the mayor as applicable and the city manager. Thus, making the discretion of whether or not an issue raised by constituents could be heard before the council. Who proposed that in this committee?
Can't remember.
How did it get on the proposed rules?
I will just offer that this was months and months in process. I don't recall.
Who all was involved in this committee if it wasn't the three of you in writing these proposed changes to the rules?
City attorney.
Yeah, so I attended 2 or 3 committee meetings. If there were 2 in 2021, that's what I don't remember. There may have been 1, there may have been 2. And then there was a recent one that they went through the changes that I prepared in October of 21 to say how to change those.
That's when I think a lot of these changes were in, was back in 21.
That's my, yeah.
So what were these reactions to?
Yeah, I'm the scribe here, so I'm not going to be able to tell you the source.
Oh, okay, that's what I'm getting at. So there's an unnamed source of the changes. Are they present?
Let me speak to the one issue that you had with the mayor and the as applicable language. So one of the changes is council member includes, it used to say councilor, which is, your council is made up of councilors and a mayor. And the desire was to make sure that council member, so let's be really clear, instead of saying councilor and assuming that that includes the mayor, that we're saying council member to include it. And so then, of course, if the council member submits a request to the city manager, the mayor wouldn't approve that because the mayor is one of those council members. That's what the as applicable is about. So if the mayor makes a suggestion, then the city manager is the one that says, we're ready to roll with that, we can actually have it on the agenda, or this has to wait, we haven't had a chance to brief it. I'm not ready to put this on the agenda and bring it before the council for either discussion or a decision.
So the discretion, okay, so I'm gonna come off of that for a second. And there's been a number of meetings where procedures and order really mattered, and I went back to the rules. And I was finding it difficult to understand what the rules were because I was comparing the letter of the rules to what was happening in the meetings. I saw a disconnect. And it was confusing to me, and I asked the question, so are we operating under Robert's Rules of Order? I got yes sometimes, and then no other times, and then, well, we can make up our own rules, and then something else. And so some of the rules that we've been applying were never in this 2014 draft, but are found in the introduction to our agenda meetings. So never before the proposed changes in this red line edition, we had rules such as you must sign up, and they could only be found in the introduction to the agendas. In our rules, it says that the rules can be changed and adopted with a majority vote of the council. I don't believe that ever happened to institute the sign-up procedure. I don't recall. We could go back to the record, and that would be probably a good idea, because I could be wrong. I often am. But that makes it confusing to say, what are we enforcing and what are we not? There's a lot of people here today. On one of the agenda items on the website, the one that is not view details, but it's actually the agenda item, we are still limited to 10 people in here per COVID rules. So if that's listed on the agenda, right next to you must sign up, why are we picking and choosing without any communication amongst ourselves on what the rules are? Who's choosing? Who's deciding? This effort to pay close attention to the rules is an appeal, on my part, is an appeal to my fellow council members. This is our role. Let it not be usurped. Let's take hold of our positions and exercise them with due diligence, honorably, with integrity, and not because of sway from any outside force. And let us serve the constituents of our city to the best of our ability, hearing their input, seeking counsel where it's necessary. I am so thankful to the people of Cottage Grove for coming out and voicing and seeing what was happening and why, and seeing that nobody wanted to speak up as to one of the very first of 5 points that would restrict their ability to communicate with us and have us make decisions. Why? What are we afraid of? Are we afraid of the people? Are we afraid of something else? Let's articulate it. Let's talk about it. Let's converse. Let's create a culture where we converse with each other, where we trust each other to talk. That's where bad ideas get squashed out. You're able to save face, good ideas rise, and you do build that consensus. It is messy. We can do it. Let's address the things. Let's do the rules. Let's address the things that really are necessary. We have virtual meetings. In the resolution, the one justification listed in the actual resolution was to address complexities and the things that are unaddressed in the advent of virtual meetings. Let's stick to that. Maybe that's a good start. That'd be my proposal. And I love the idea on pushing it. We're doing it again. Thanks.
So I think if we can, we're just going to postpone this, and I think Mayor-elect Soulsby wants to do a full council rather than a work session, so let's just move forward with that. It's getting late, and we. Go ahead.
Yeah, we started on this months ago, and I was hoping that, and I kept bringing it up at the meetings, that we move forward on this. I feel, and I'll take part of the blame for it, that we should have finished this up in enough time to bring it back to the council to really look at it thoroughly. Our last meeting in the Sinclair room, we did the best we could, but as far as I'm concerned, with some of the stuff that came up at the work session and other things, I still feel this document is far from being done. So I think that if this committee, and I'll be part of the blame, really wanted to get this done the right way, I think we sort of made a mistake here. We should have worked on it quicker. There was a lot of space, but then again, a lot of our time was taken up with this homeless thing that we were dealing with for months, because we started this quite some time ago. And so I think that this council can do better and work with the people on this document. And I agree that I think that we should go back and look at this whole thing over and just do it right and make sure that we're not disenfranchising the voter and doing the right thing. So that's where I stand on that. And I want to thank you for your comments. Very well done. And for some of the people that spoke. So that's what I have to say. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. So we'll go ahead and move on to 7D, resolution adopting management plan for public use lands. Mr. Myers.
So you have before you tonight a resolution and then a subsequent ordinance that in essence adopts the management plan for the use of public lands by individuals experiencing homelessness that the council looked at a previous meeting in a draft form. The resolution is establishing the basic policy associated with that resolution on how to manage our public lands. Goes into a little more detail in the draft version that we had back in October. We didn't put the detail in on all the different public lands and how we evaluated them and what are some of the criteria associated with those different places. This goes into that in much more detail, lines out a little more legislative in intent for why we're looking at managing our public lands in order to try to manage this and manage where and how people are using it. So you have your Exhibit A that kind of basically sets out the policy. At any time, the lands that are designated can be undesignated for camping, and other locations would have to be designated that would meet the needs of the homelessness in the community. We have set up in this basic public lands policy 3 levels, and level 1 being those places that we would designate areas for camping on public lands, on parks, or other public lands that exist, and this excludes right-of-ways or streets, as we've defined in Title 12, in Title 10. Level 2 properties are those properties that we would look to if we need to from the level 1 sites to satisfy those requirements of Martin, Boise, Blake, and Johnson, to make sure that we have those places that people can sleep, lie, rest, keep warm and dry, that complies with those laws. It lines out how and what kind of criteria might be there with the use of some of those properties. In the Row River Nature Trail, the East Regional Park, for example, we spelled out that during the dry months, we specifically wanted to try to avoid those locations because they have a lot of underbrush and things that could create the possibility for wildfire and things like that. So we looked at some of those safety issues associated with those individual pieces of property. The level 3 properties are basically the properties that are the last piece that we use. A lot of them are dedicated for specific use. Skate park, dog parks generally are not good locations for camping, and so we can set those aside. Those pieces of property that we've leased to others or that we're leasing have also been identified here. Basically, these are the ones that we use in the last resort. In essence, we're hoping and we believe with level 1 that we've got enough land designated for camping that we won't need to move into 2. But if we have to move into 2, then or 3, this would be the ones that we'd use if there was a major earthquake, the Cascadia subduction hit, the reservoir was full of water, the dams broke, and then some wildfires burst out and everybody was without a house. We'd open up everything to be able to use that. So we have that potential to use those. So basically what you're doing with this resolution first is you're kind of setting the policy, lining out some of those locations and trying to get that objectively reasonableness associated with how we manage where homeless individuals will be able to camp and use our properties. So the resolution's before you. Any questions or that you have, we'd be happy to talk about this.
We had some people that signed up on this. So Barbara Schaaf.
I'm fighting South and Steve, and I actually did. I was told you had 5 minutes and it would be the conference stage. And it seems to me the whole first part of the council meeting taken up the time that we were supposed to have. So that's how your rules go. Okay, these grants are not free. I worked all my life to have people get to use my tasks. These grants are not free. They have been written for and accepted. I would not like to have had to stay. I would like to have had to stay in this mess. Now we have a mess and we need to tend to it. I suggest a workshop on how to handle all this. Boxes made available only to adult people. I would like to see these boxes for families with children. Some kind of plan for these people to work on some of the free stuff they get. If they have to work for their space, you will see a big decline in these camps. We give everything free. For long, all homeless people from Portland to San Francisco will be in our backyard. In a very short time, Cottage Grove will have more homeless than citizens. By the way, don't worry about feeding them. They have good food stamps, courtesy of tax money. And I'm really I haven't counted them. I really see a discrepancy. Everywhere I look, we need people. Then I see all these homeless people doing nothing and getting all this free stuff. And one of the problems is probably don't care, but my husband and I only make $21,000 a year. You guys probably make a pretty good salary from where you're at. But we make, and I have children, I have grandchildren, great grandchildren. like to get my family their birthday presents, their Christmas presents. I can't. He goes down there to that guy that wants to drug out. I just don't get it. I think there should be accountability. As a tax person, I would like to have a little say on how my taxes are spent. I stay high because these homeless are not contributing in any way to have money for the next generations. When it comes to time for my great grandkids, there's not going to be anything because they're not creating any money. We're just give. They take. It's going to end sometime, and when it ends, that's probably going to be my great grandkids. And I like that. I work really hard to pay my taxes, and I do pay my taxes, and I get responsible. But I don't like giving what little money that I have extra to those people sitting down there in those tents. From men sitting in cubicle boxes. Well, I can't even afford to give my kids or grandkids or great grandkids birthday or Christmas presents. I am actually, I would like to see a forum for questions and answers on a lot of the private stuff that you're not council stuff. You guys are all discussing with me and everything. I don't even know what you're talking about. I have no clue what you're talking about. And you spent all of our private time, the private citizens, going over all this stuff. I don't even know what you're saying. Anyway, thank you for your time.
Joanna Z.
There you go. What most surprises me about this management plan is that there's no course correction with it. It's kind of like we're just still going with the same plan. I think it's clear to anyone to see that this plan isn't really working. With just one man deceased on opening night, an area that's overflowing. I don't think it was intended for homesteading. I thought perhaps it was a temporary place for people to be and keeping them out of the parks, right? So I'm shocked that that people are not more outraged at the death of this young man. He needed services, and yet nothing in this plan talks about a strategy for services. It's all about housing. So it takes money to develop these committees and subcommittees and councils and then to get grants and then to be accountable for the grants. And then at some point, then you get some housing and the whole thing's to shift around. The people you intended it for never really get into that housing. So there's nothing in there. Utah spends about $300 million for about 7,000 homeless people. And they've got the best facilities, but it's not solving the problem. So money does not solve the problem. They need community, they need services, they need support to reintegrate back into the community. Someone reminded me of recently what our goals were if we could work together as a community for the goals, and I realized we don't have common goals on this. I know that one of the groups that I'm with, Community Strong, our goal is to get them off of the streets into services, back into housing, reintegrated in the community. But if your goal is to bring more to the community, then it's working. If that's what your goal is, because we see that over the past year through the HMIS system, there's 1,000 more homeless since this time last year. 10% of that 1,000 is in Cottage Grove for the entire county. So we have 100 more homeless through that system than we did a year ago. 10%. I mean, is Cottage Grove 10% of the entire population? Is that? And it doesn't make sense to me. We seem to be taking a lot more of the homeless. We do know that there's about 20 to 40 people from Eugene down at the overflow site. So it's going to make it more and more difficult to manage and help people and support people. If there's so many, it's just going to it's not sustainable for our community. So I'd be curious. The mention here is the adoption of the management plan does not prohibit camping on public land. Why not? Wasn't that the point of this, to keep people out of the parks? Why doesn't it? I mean, why isn't that really, really clear in here? So that's one of my questions. And then I'd be curious to the amount of money that's spent to clean up the trash and stuff for the increased people in the community. So dignity and respect. You talk about dignity and respect for everybody. There's no dignity and respect in living in the way that a lot of people are living, there. The drugs, mental illness. I mean, how kind is that, feeding people? We need to have a very clear strategic plan on how we're going to address the addiction and mental health services, not how 2-3 years down the line we're going to provide housing for people. Right now, they need those services. I'm also concerned about the lack of transparency with all of this. I thought the 99 site was supposed to be for the unsheltered people, and I'm finding more and more that there's people that actually are not unsheltered getting into there. That is a concern. So again, the idea was to be able to not cite people for lying, sitting, sleeping on public property because we had shelter beds available, but now we're giving the shelter beds to people who had shelter or have the potential of not having shelter. So that's a concern. Again, transparency, and then we're talking about a $429,000 grant Cottage Grove would administer, would follow through on, but we were told that Hearing 4 would actually get grant money for that. So that's of concern. We just want more transparency, integrity, communication about a lot of this, and we don't feel like we're really getting it. The other thing says that be it further resolved that the City Council supports the plan proposed by the OMA Task Force on Homelessness. Wow, that's kind of new. I didn't know. I mean, it would be nice to have a little more time, I think, for the councilors to discuss with their constituents. I know this was your work, Mayor Gowing, but I'm wondering, it's all of a sudden when it says the council, does that mean the people support this plan? Again, a lot of grant money, and where is the measure of success of these programs? How can we call it successful? Not the number of people served, but what does the community as a whole look like? Is there, are there more services, sanitation services? Is the crime rate up? What are those, what are the exact metrics of success of people in permanent housing? And again, I'd like to, invite you to our Community Strong Cottage Grove, first Wednesday of every month, to discuss what are our common goals. If we can get to that place first, I realize we're not there. So thank you.
Dwayne Taddy.
Dwayne Taddy, 77561 Highway 99. We've been accused of helping further this homeless agenda in Cottage Grove, and I'm not taking the blame. I'm not responsible. Karen Munsell, who's watching online, and myself, we move into crisis mode when we see a crisis. And we saw a crisis the first week of opening the camp behind Dairy Mart that the city manager did under administrative authority under municipal code. That needs to be changed. This is putting the cart before the horse, guys. You guys have been accused of already voting for what's in front of you today. That's not a fact. You guys aren't responsible for what's going on behind Dairy Mart. Maybe by inaction, but not by action, because you didn't create that down there. The city manager did that himself. It says it right there in if you look at the agenda, it says created by administrative authority. So we go into crisis mode. Brian Miller hangs himself because he's cold, doesn't have a heater, his tent's moldy. He's got sticky fingers and a drug problem. His friends won't let him in the van. It's going to be 26 degrees for a week. I see a post on Facebook, the Bearden family looking for 150 foot of extension cord. One of my enemies on Facebook, Dave Pretchel, comes down there with an extension cord. You can't run an extension cord from city property out to the street. It's not going to work. To keep your 9-month-old, your 3-year-old, and your 5-year-old and your wife warm in a pop-up camper. So I drive down there. I work on the railroad. I work nights, Sunday through Thursday. Everybody knows me, knows how to get. I don't sleep but 4 or 5 hours a night. Maybe that's my problem. Here's the deal. I drive down there. I shouldn't be driving. I go down there. I get in Teresa Cowan's face. On the budget committee, we gave her position. I know what the position is well. I know what it's supposed to be. I know what it is. I know what it isn't. She's a beautiful person with a beautiful heart. She knew my mom. She knows that I have a heart. I get in her face. The city's going to tow this camper tonight, not tonight, but that night, 27 degrees, and displace a mom and a dad and a 9-month-old and 3-year-old and 5-year-old. Displace them with nowhere to go, tow their camper. I got a chain and a padlock in my car. Just like when I went down to the community center when you guys evicted the campers from the dog kennels you created on the wettest weekend of the spring. Mr. Myers did that. Karen Munsell and I got into crisis mode, and we moved the people to Trailhead Park the weekend before Grand Fondo. We had a meeting with Richard. He said, it's not a big deal. We know it hurt his feelings. So we moved him to Trailhead because it was covered. Not because it was Grand Fondo weekend, because it was covered. And they stayed there, and they did pretty good. Now, we get back on track here. I got the chain and padlock in my car. I tell Teresa I'm chaining myself to the camper. And she knows I'm being honest. I'm going to do it. I already called my boss. He said, go for it, dude. Teresa tells me she has no authority to make a decision to let these people stay here, running their extension cord through the fence to plug into a small heater so they can keep their family alive. Alive. Okay? Again, it's not your guys' fault. You didn't create this mess. Immediately, anyways. So I said, well, we got an hour till City Hall closes on this Friday. Let's find somebody who has the authority. Richard Myers. Well, I'm going to go down to his office. And I'm not leaving until the cop drags me out, till Chief Growth drags me out, or we come to a solution. So what does she do? She makes a phone call, and surprisingly, after you've been dealing with this problem all day, some money comes out of the city fund and puts these people up into a hotel, and then a lady with a very big heart puts up 2 more nights. I told this lady we need to think with our heads, not with our hearts. That's where we're going wrong with this. Is we're thinking with our hearts and not with our heads. So anyways, I'm not taking the blame for this. Cart before the horse. Barbara, that hits your heart right there. 21 grand a year. She's trying to buy presents for her kids and all that. She thinks, you get paid to go up here. I know, Mayor, you're a retired warehouser worker. I know what you make a year. It's not, and Mike, I know what you make a year. I know what the counselors make up here. Small business owners, 2 of them. We got a guy up here on disability. Probably makes less than you, Barbara. Anyways. Look, I got 20 seconds. Focus on a mufti. I've been talking about mufti for 2 years. Barbara doesn't know what I'm talking about. I'll talk to Barbara outside afterwards. A low income, affordable housing component for the mufti. Those pallet shelters they're not housing. Housing first, that's not a part of that plan. Those are not houses. Let's do a mufti. We could have had 20% of the 80 is 20. We could have had 20 low income apartments on 10th Street, but we don't. Because you guys didn't take action and put a low-income component in a movie. Let's work on that. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Ken.
Amy Meriday.
Good evening, Mayor. It's been suggested that the homeless don't have anything to worry about. They don't have to worry about anything. Well, I've got news for you. Mr. Mayor, the people at Overflow 1 do have something to worry about, and that is that the site management plan says that possible site contamination by hazardous materials, or when there is immediate danger to human life or safety, that it can be shut down. It also says that the site has running water, and in fact, water comes in, but there is no place for the water to go out. And so I don't know if Dwayne set it up, Karen set it up, or the city set it up, but there's no gray water system at Overflow 1, which some of us call the Brian Miller Park. Okay, so the original language before this update was that sanitation services would be provided, and that meant porta potties, and it said running water. And so Overflow 2 doesn't have water. That's dry camping. It should be advertised as such. It's not a bad idea. People know how to do it in Oregon, and not maybe everybody who's experiencing an unhoused situation has ever dry camped, but there may be some who have. So I'm just a little bit concerned because the water coming in is obviously being measured or not in terms of volume, and wastewater management is something that the city is involved in. We don't want people throwing dishwater in our stormwater system, for instance. There's some level of filtration, but maybe not what is the standard for the state of Oregon. So it seems like we need to collect the water, like the porta potties get pumped, a container could be pumped with the same rig. Otherwise, a dirty sort of gray water system could be created. Perhaps Mr. Faye Stewart or Mr. Eric the planner, our city planner, would be interested in providing support around such a community-driven effort to build a gray water system, charcoal, surface trenching, that sort of affair. Environmental consequences to the site. We can't have it be unsanitary due to food waste. If people are pouring dirty dishwater from their tent on the ground outside their tent, there will be an unhygienic situation in just a matter of time. Please do not throw out the dishwater and rather maintain infection control so we can keep this place open and have it be a success for the large number of people who lived there, who knew Brian Miller his entire life, went to school with him in this town, and are devastated by his death. Some people say these people don't deserve extras. I think that particular group of people, and I would call them the first cohort of the Brian Miller camp, the first 182 that the county required us to provide housing for, they're being tracked by Johanna Z. I didn't know she worked for the town. She says that they and they are doing this, and we know. Anyway, so.
Got it.
And you do not get to make a point.
Keep it to us.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And so I'm concerned about sanitation at the site. I believe the city has made a commitment to sanitation. I am into sanitation, and I will continue to be into sanitation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We have a resolution number.
2086.
Councilor Fleck.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the council adopt resolution 2086.
Second. Motion with a second. Is there discussion?
Yes,
Yes.
thank you. I'm not in support of this. I've said from day one that we should have done a dusk till dawn, and was told that we don't have the manpower for it, but we are sure using a lot of manpower with these sites. And in the overflow site, it says that the city can watch it easily. And then the other sites subsequently to open up, the North Douglas site, the site is easy visibility for monitoring from both public safety staff as well as public works crews. So we are still using our staff, and this is a 24/7 site where we would be cutting that in half if we did a dusk till dawn. Also, I have noticed that we spoke a lot about lying, sitting, sleeping in the act of staying warm, and we've changed that wording to camping, and there is a big distinction between the two. Camping allows people to keep their stuff there, where if they were to abandon, the city is responsible for storing their belongings. And if for some reason the city decides to ask people to vacate, then we need to give a 72-hour notice, which is different from dusk till dawn camping. We do have a warming shelter now, and we've been working on the beds for freezing nights. We already have an overflow. I think that the most we should do from this point on is a dusk till dawn. We have, and that's all we ever had to do by the law, was a dusk till dawn. And we are well over that. I think before expanding this, as this population grows in our town, and I listened to the Beaver Show this morning, and the city manager did recognize that other cities are sending people to our city for the services because they don't have them, and that he said he was going to reach out to them and tell them that they need to come in line with that as well and have those services so that they don't come to our town that are not citizens of our town. And he said something about that it's unfair to do that to Cottage Grove, which I agree with, and that he was going to go after them. But that's a hard case to prove. because there's a lot of do-gooders that will tell people that City of Cottage Grove has a lot of services. And so they come. And if the whole point of this was to avoid litigation, this sounds like we would be trying to litigate in another city for them sending people to us. And as he said, that's a very difficult case to try and win. I just don't know where this ends. Every map or every park in our city is on this. And we were told, this is the way out to keep people from camping in our parks, but yet there is a detailed plan here. And I think, seriously, you guys, the citizens are not happy with this. I mean, we just heard Amy Merryday talking about sanitation, and look at what Eugene just had to do under Jefferson Bridge. So we know very well that this could be a very large problem. We know that we have at least 100 new people in our town. The city manager also said that they took 9 people to Eugene, relocated them to Eugene, well, for their services. Well, doesn't that make us doing exactly the same thing that we're saying we're going to go after another city for? We got to start thinking about this, as others have said, with our head right now, and passing this plan that opens up every one of our parks to this plan, I think is a mistake. And we need to really think about that before you vote on this plan.
Councilor Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. From what I understand, this document protects our parks in a certain order. So it's with the Martin Boise and with the things that are at hand. This protects these parks in a certain order. I see your concern, and I do have some concerns on the other side of the coin with this, because I personally think that the 12th Street spot is a train wreck right now. I think it needs a host. I think it needs rules. You have several factions of the community fighting over what's best for these people, basically using them as political pawns as far as I'm concerned. I think it's a train wreck. And I know that about 2/3 of the people in the 12th Street camp are not from Cottage Grove. So your concerns are very valid. But this particular document, I think, protects our parks in the way that if other people try to stay here or here or here, that it's written down, from what I understand, that they can't be at this point until the city has gone through these order of parks. And I don't expect people this migration to the point that we're getting all the people on this. I just think it's a way to protect our parks. But I do see a lot of your concern, and I have it too after what I've been seeing, because I really feel that as a city, if we're not looking at the example that Carry It Forward runs the 99 site, from what I'm understanding, things are going really well there. We have had people go to other programs. We have other things here and there. I think we can do better than 12. Like I said, I think putting a host out there in an RV and putting rules out there and 3 strikes, you're out. I drive by 2-3 times a day. And when I'm seeing our citizens fighting over what's best, how to help these people, I mean, thank God for Teresa Town. I was in her office today. The work she is doing, I mean, I don't think that woman's paid enough. The personal stories she told me about people that are coming in from our community, that she is just stretched on resources because the people that aren't from our community. We had a 71-year-old and I think a 91-year-old lately come in needing help because of their rent going through the roof. So I think, I would like to see this council relook at 12th Street, the way it's run. But this, I think, protects our parks. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Stanton.
I had a question. If it's pertinent. Councilor Soulsby mentioned the manpower. I think the word she used. That's already been going into the 12th Street side, aside from what Teresa's doing. Can we speak to kind of the scope of that?
What was that again?
We're already expending quite a bit of manpower on the site at 12th Street. Can we talk about what what the city is doing, what employees are doing?
Yeah, nothing compared to running a dusk to dawn. I mean, we're sending the contractor out to dump the porta potties twice a week, dumpsters 3 times a week, because a lot of stuff is being donated that ends up in the dumpsters just because it's not appropriate to be bringing to a homeless camp. I mean, what good do they need a box of VHS tapes for? So things are getting there that end up going into the dumpster. People bring a lot of food. They can't store food. There's no place for them to store it. They don't have those kind of facilities. So it gets in the dumpster. And so it's filling up quite quickly. So we're seeing that going on. And Teresa and the team we have put together are working and trying to bring groups together to coordinate and make sure that the donations are actually going through the proper channels. They're not taking them to the site, that they're going to some organizations in the community that then can distribute it. We're continuing to work on that. But yeah, the oversight or the monitoring is, hey, we go by it. We drive by it. We're seeing it all the time. That's the intent of what we're saying by the monitoring. It's a visible location that we can see on a regular basis to be able to determine whether the rules are being followed. That's one of the things that also that is created by this resolution, or actually by the ordinance. The next thing is that all of the rules in parks, except for the hours of parks, are going to be applied to any land that's designated for camping. This rule basically does not create, and it'd be great to create something with some management, with some host or something going on, but we don't have the funding to do that. We don't have the resources for that yet. And that's why the Oregon Mayors Association's proposal to the state is so important, that yeah, then we could advance and maybe do something more with the site, put it into some kind of management, have some kind of operation going there rather than just having a camping location, because that's what it is. We are designating spots for camping so that there are only locations that they can camp in the city are those designated spaces, so they're not scattered throughout all the parks or along the rivers or under the bridges, that they're in a specific location.
Councilor Savage.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. A thought that comes to mind that we can all put into practice as a community that I learned when I was really young is it's better to donate to a service and let folks who need that service go to that service, which kind of funnels them through that system. If you're going to hand somebody a $20 bill, are they actually going to buy groceries? We don't know the answer to that. So in order to do our due diligence, we can come together and let's continue to donate. We don't want to discourage anybody to do that, to not donate, but let's donate to different services and then they encourage folks who are unhoused to tap into these resources that are there, because that then takes it out of the city's hands. We are then not liable for those donations. I too am concerned with how big it's growing. I know that the rent moratorium has ended and people are now losing their houses. This is unprecedented. We've not seen this before because we've not been here before. Let's lead with love. Let's lead with kindness. Let's come together. This fighting that it's so hard to witness. It's hard to witness walking down the street. It's hard to witness in so many different avenues. How can we come together and be united? Because I think we're all talking about the same thing, and that is how can we help? And what a wonderful place we live in that so many of us want to help. Now, what does that help look like? That help doesn't necessarily mean a hand out. It means a hand up. So what do we do to help somebody help themselves? They need to value themselves. They need to feel valuable. They need to feel like they are accountable for themselves. How can we do that? We do that by treating people with respect and dignity and talking to folks kindly. So I would just really encourage that. Thank you. Do we have people at the Douglas site now?
No, we do not. The last look that we looked at it, there was nobody there yet. It is open and ready for individuals supposed to be staying there, but there's no one at that site. The shelter site, the camping site there on 12th Street has 32 spaces and it's full. And there's 32. It filled about half, if not more than half, with just our own individuals in the community when Trailhead, Silk Creek, and other locations in the community moved out there. So to hear that 2/3 and more than half, those numbers aren't right. It's probably quote, more than half that are our own individuals from our own community. Just Friday, or today, Teresa called, we have an elderly couple, 90 years old. They have some money coming in, but they're being evicted and they have nowhere to go. So we continue to see this happening. Just 2 weeks ago, we saw a good 10, 15 new people that were evicted locally that are hitting the streets. And so it's going to continue to grow. And it's not necessarily, the numbers coming from Eugene and Springfield or even Crestwell are not that big. They're not huge. They are coming, but I think they've stopped because coming to the Douglas site is not any different than being at one of the campsites in Eugene or Springfield. So.
Could we propose, and I don't know the answer to this, could we propose that anything moving forward is a dusk till dawn and just kind of let things
One of the challenges with the
settle
dusk
where
to
we're at?
dawn is the Johnson and Blake cases say that they have a right to keep warm and dry. So as soon as they leave the dusk to dawn, they can go and set up a tent and be in a park and all day long, staying warm and dry. And you'll be moving them back and forth. That's not providing any opportunities for us to make those assessments. To carry it forward is going in the site. Teresa and others are going in the site and trying to assess where and what's going on with individuals that are there. And this gives us an opportunity to try to make some of those management issues that we can't afford to do, but try to make those connections where we can try to get them connected to other services that can actually help them. So the dusk to dawn wouldn't do that. They'd be scattered throughout the community. We'd be wrestling trying to get them out of parks regularly because they'd be moving into parks during the day and trying to stay warm and dry. And then we'd have to move them back out again at night. Just managing the check-in and the check-out of the dusk to dawn facility is way more than what we're spending in time and energy right now.
I just want to clarify, so that was a very good policy response and practical response to what potentially was a legal question, and the answer is yes, you could do dusk to dawn.
You can, but we physically, logistically cannot.
Good. And I just wanted to clarify.
There's other ways though, staying warm and dry.
Councilor Flatt.
Yeah, I think that the overflow site is certainly a challenge for us at the moment. There are folks coming from other areas, absolutely. I see them at my agency. And so that concerns me as well. We as a small community do not have the capacity to serve, a huge volume of folks. But I agree, the North Douglas site is not going to be appealing, as are any of the other parks without services. Our agency does not have the breadth of services Eugene and Springfield does, and we're not going to see huge numbers. In fact, my hope would be that this will balance out. I do think we need to have a self-governed style, occupy village style of management out there. And I will do my best to see if there's any funding out there, because I know it's a challenge. So let me digress a little bit here. So in our county, we have what are called community action agencies, which actually are the ones that receive federal funds and state funds. Lane County is our community action agency, and they are the group that typically does shelters and homeless prevention services and et cetera, et cetera. I would love to try to partner with them to see if we can't get that secured. In fact, ultimately, I would love to see them taking over all of these sorts of services, because they're the ones with the skill set to do so. That being said, they also don't have the money, which is where we need to keep lobbying the state, because with House Bill 3115, they have created an unfunded mandate. They've said, you will take care of this, and have provided zero funding to do it. And so it is upon us as counselors to hammer them, to do that. I will say my fear is that will become a public health hazard and we will have to close it down. And that is a challenge that I think we all need to put our heads together on and work out. I do think the gray water situation needs to be resolved. I don't know what the answer to that is, but I do think we need to put our heads together and fix that. All of that really doesn't have anything to do with the resolution that's before us. The resolution before us is the final piece of what we've been working on for the entire year. You know, this is the whole idea, was to make sure that we had the other parks with playgrounds and community parks without folks camping in them and the challenges that go along with that. So while the overflow site is a challenge, it could be worse. I mean, if we just go to unregulated camping citywide, I think that's worse. And so I think that this needs to be adopted, and we need to continue working on it, and be open that if things are not working down the road, to revisit it, and which I promise to do if we can't go any further. So I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
Councilor Ruth.
Thank you. That last point, Mr. Mayor, that how are we defining if things are working?
It's a good question.
Maybe we better set that first.
Can I?
Yeah.
So the challenge, like Councilor Savage mentioned, I'm seeing folks evicted weekly. Okay, so the moratorium's up. There are folks being evicted all the time. I had a local landlord talk about charging $1,200 a month for rent when he could charge $2,000 a month. You know, that was a good thing. You know, I just bought my house 5 years ago. My mortgage is $1,300 and well, now $40 after taxes have gone up. So the problem, my son just moved back in because rent in Eugene was $1,600 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment. Folks, this is not sustainable. You know, this is the downside of capitalism, which I'm a capitalist. I totally support it, but unregulated. We're going to force lots of people out onto the street because we don't have the housing. I totally, which is a rare occasion, sorry, just joking, agree with Mr. Toddy that we need to do more. I certainly encourage us to look at the MUFD for a low-income piece. I want to make sure there's still the benefit, though. We want housing developed, and if we make it too tight and we lose those people who are willing to do it, we need to assess that. So I would love to meet with some of the property management folks and see if that's a component that will still work. But I'm totally into it. But what is working and what isn't, I don't know that there is an answer, and I don't think that the state or the West Coast has that answer because there's not the housing to support our population. So to ask for a solution when the problem keeps exacerbating, I don't know that all we can do is put Band-Aids on and do our best is the only thing I can offer.
Yeah, I only asked the question because if the logic is that we will assess to see if it's working down the road and that you're open to course change based on that, but there is no point that we will assess from, then that's kind of empty. And we will continue where the momentum has taken us. And so that's my concern. We keep justifying the momentum on that. We will correct it if it needs to be corrected. That just doesn't work in anywhere else in life that I've ever experienced.
I can't argue with you because you're right. The problem is doing nothing to me is not a solution either. And so I guess what I'm asking is let's let this go for a period and reassess. I don't know that it'll change, but we'll have that experience at least to draw from, and maybe some other things will change as far as the legislature or other potential funding opportunities. That's all I can offer.
Yeah, I guess my retort to that is let this go for a period and then assess. What I hear in that is let's continue with phase 2 and 3, which is leverage the tax base, grants to build the housing, build the low income, partner with Square One Village, develop all the properties. So that's years and years down the road. And so when I hear that, it's actually let this go for a while until we've accomplished all of our objectives, and then we'll assess, but we'll be too far down the road. If that's not a success, we'll have wasted all that time and money. We're talking about a moral issue here. We're talking about, that's what we're talking about. You're hitting on that, Councilor Savage. This is why it's so difficult, because we're in a society that can't have that conversation, and that's why we can't come to agreement on it. And that's why I don't think the city should be part of that.
Council Solby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Myers, can you give me a little clarity on what you mean when you say that, like the difference between dusk till dawn management and as opposed to what's going on right now? Like, what do you envision a dusk till dawn management to be?
With the dusk to dawn management, you would have an area that would be closed off to any access during the day. And then at 7 o'clock at night, 5 o'clock at night, it would open up. You'd have to have at least 2 individuals, if not more, staff there, checking people in, making sure that everything is set safely, that they don't have any weapons with them, they don't have any contraband with them. You're monitoring that. They're going to be there for 2 to 3 hours at least as they set up the dusk to dawn. They will be there throughout the evening. Then in the morning, you're going to have staff that's going to be there to make sure everyone leaves. And you will go through that process again. So you actually have multiple staff that would be there every night from 5 in the evening till 7 in the morning. And then after 7, you're going to be there cleaning up and taking care of stuff and moving things away as well, probably till about 8 at least, to close the place down. The individuals that were there would then have to move out and take all their belongings, go somewhere else, and they would be in city parks when individuals are trying to use the parks. And so they would be spending their time in city parks, on sidewalks, all over the community. And we would have nothing we could do for that because under the court case, they can keep warm and dry on public land.
Okay, this is where I think we disagree, because I would think that as a city, we could pass an ordinance that says if it's dusk till dawn, that you're not allowed to come in here. And if you do come in there before then,
they will be in other
safe.
Parks outside of dusk to dawn.
Why, when we can designate that this is what we're doing and this is what we have available, then okay.
The court case requires that. Doesn't mean just at night. It is all day long. They have a right to be on public land.
Absolutely, but they can also be underneath the cover at Trailhead and not setting up a tent to stay warm and dry. They can wear a coat like the rest of the people.
And they can be in the pavilions at Bohemia and at Coiner. They can set up a pop-up tent
they
anywhere.
Can, but I don't understand why we wouldn't try it. And especially if it is a possibility that, we're trying this one. We've tried this model. We've had all kinds of problems. Why wouldn't we try a dusk till dawn, see how much management it truly takes? Do an ordinance that you can set up your tent at this time and you have to be out by this time, and not be ridiculous and stringent at first. If they're a little slow getting out, we can be understanding and give them a little extra time. Pretty soon, people know the rules, that this is the way it is. You need to be done and out. I was just at a meeting the other night with a gentleman that had experienced homelessness for 3 years. And he said, where you guys are going wrong, this is from him who was homeless for 3 years, was that you're allowing people to have so many belongings. And 2 tent sites, one to sleep in and one to store everything. And then they're afraid to leave it because they can't go to a job because they're afraid their stuff is going to get stolen. They don't want to go to beds for freezing nights because they don't want to leave their belongings alone because they could get stolen. So they're talking about putting a guard out there to guard their things. He said when he was homeless all those years, he carried everything on his back because he knew he was going to be moving, and it was not a forever thing. And this is where I have to stand on this, is that it shouldn't be a forever thing. People need to get on their feet, get their purpose back, be able to get up in the morning and go to a job and, be a productive member of society, and will take care of the ones that aren't able to do that. But there is a lot that are able to do that. And we are enabling by doing this. And I'm just saying, why don't we try it? What does it hurt to try it? Let's think about this before you vote for this plan. That this is something that I've just heard from the city manager over and over. No, take too much manpower. But I don't think we need to check them in. I think we just go by and check at a certain time. If they're there earlier, it's like, hey, we're going to allow you to do this one time, but just so you know, you're not supposed to set up till 7. And then if you go out there the next morning and they're a little late, help them on their way and then be gone. But they don't make a mess because they don't have long enough to be there for that long to make a mess. And you're right there. Say, hey, did you make that mess? Pick it up. Let's be accountable here. Or, I don't throw things on the ground. I can be cited. So we all need to be accountable. We're all citizens of this town. So I think we should try this.
Councilor Fleck.
So let's put morals aside for a second and just be pragmatic. And I'm going to apologize. I've been up since 2:45 this morning, and I'm tired. So I hope I make some sense here. From a pragmatic sense, I ran the warming shelters last year for community sharing in the current overflow site. Every morning, checking folks out was a huge challenge because many folks will have a hard time getting to sleep and may have only gone to sleep not long before it was time to check out. This was a very labor-intensive process of trying to get folks up and moving. And let's think about that. Who is going to be doing that? If it's a dusk to dawn that's unmanaged, it's going to be our police force. So our police force is going to be the ones that's going to be out there helping folks move. There's not going to be folks who are going to do this on their own. This is going to be folks who are tired and resting, and it's going to be our police force that are already shorthanded that are going to be the ones that are going to be moving folks along. And then if they are trying to carry belongings and they can't carry that tent and that tarp and that sleeping bag and all of these things on their back, who's going to be the ones taking care of that? That's going to be our public works folks. So when we talk about labor intensive, I want you to understand what we're talking about. And the whole point of doing this, I think a dusk to dawn is just definitely going to be more work and more of a challenge. That being said, a self-governed camp is different than a dusk to dawn. A city manager's description of dusk to dawn is the current model that's going on in Eugene, and I think also Springfield, but with like St. Vincent de Paul and the sites they have up there. The Opportunity Village is the 24/7 model, but it's self-governed, and you do not have staff there all the time. You have the nonprofit is just oversight to help a self-governed group, which I think is the model that's going to keep the behaviors good and the trash down and all of the other issues. The dusk to dawn, just from a city standpoint, from a pragmatic standpoint, makes no sense. I'm sorry. We really need to think about what we're asking when we say that. And yes, I think if you're moving folks all day, every day, yes, you might get some folks that'll leave town. And I think that's ultimately what we're trying to do here. I mean, we want to be honest, right? What we're trying to do is get folks to move out of town. And yes, I think that there will be some that'll go, but I also think that the burden on our city staff, our police and public works, is just going to overwhelm our city. And I don't think that's the right answer. And I'm going to stop there.
Councilor Fleck, with all due respect, though, you did say that about the self-governed unmanned camp as well, that you thought that was a recipe for disaster, and we're doing it. So why not give it a shot? I mean,
I'm going to call the question.
Yeah, if there's no more, I'm going to call the question. Will the reporter please call the roll?
Counselor Solsby,
Nay.
Counselor Savage,
Aye.
Youth Representative,
I abstain.
Counselor Fleck,
Aye.
Counselor Stennett,
Aye.
Counselor Irvin,
Nay.
Counselor Roberts, Mayor Gowing.
Aye. Brings us to item E, an ordinance amending chapter 9.28 and 12.24 Cottage Grove Municipal Code, city parks and playgrounds. Mr. Myers.
This is the provision, these are the code provisions that will clean up our code and eliminate those challenges that we have under 3115. Under House Bill 3115, the state legislature passed saying that if you have any kind of provisions in your city codes or county codes that impact those experiencing homelessness in a totality or in some way, that those need to be adjusted or taken care of. And anything that prohibits or anything that eliminates the ability of individuals to experience homelessness and live and use public lands. So what we've done here is we've gone through, the city attorney has done an audit of our city code, searched for special references or terms to find those. One of those that we hadn't thought of previously in discussions was chapter 9.28, which is our curfew ordinance. The curfew ordinance basically says that no youth under the age of 18 can be in a city park after the hours of, between the hours of midnight and 4, I believe, or something like that. And that it'd be subject to provisions of the citations and everything that way. Under House Bill 3115, it says specifically city code and county code. And so our ordinance for curfew mirrors exactly, or state law mirrors our code. It's probably we mirror state code, the same thing. If we enforce the state code for curfew, it's not an issue, and there's no challenge under the 3115. So we're proposing that we remove 9.28 completely from the city code, and we use ORS to cite for curfew violations if we need to. The other provisions, the most common one that we were looking at is in 1224, in I and J, no, I and K. Those two provisions had the requirement that no one could be in the parks from 10 o'clock until 5 o'clock in the morning, 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. And under the interpretation of Martin Boise and House Bill 3115 and Blake and Johnson, that would be prohibited, that would be illegal, and would be grounds for challenge the city on those constitutional basis. By amending them to say that, hey, we're going to continue to apply that curfew time of our parks and close our parks from 10 to 5 a.m. as we follow the public management plan, the land management plan. So by designating an area for camping, we can then close the parks, all the other parks from 10 to 5, and continue to do that and have that ability to control our parks. So we've modified those two provisions to do that. We've also cleaned up, the other part that was cleaned up considerably was our exclusion provisions. And there was some discussion Friday morning about the exclusion, and I want to point out in C, under section 5 of the ordinance, 12.24040, exclusion from the park. If you go to section C, it says, any exclusion order shall not take effect until the 6th day after the notice is issued. Because there was a concern that, hey, if we issue an exclusion and they have 6 days to file the appeal and they get excluded from the park immediately, they don't. They don't get excluded from the land immediately. That was one of the provisions of Johnson and Blake, that you couldn't exclude somebody immediately without that appeal being available. So they have those 6 days. There's a stay, essentially, during those 6 days for them to file that appeal. Even with a long weekend, if they did get cited in on a Thursday or a Friday afternoon or Friday night, they could still meet that requirement by the next week and submit that. It doesn't have to go to the court on Thursdays. The court clerk is here most of the week and would handle that, and as soon as it's received, it would be counted as received during those 6 days. So I think that basically covers most of the changes. We did do, we did find that under our current code, there is no provision for overseeing and managing our public property, excluding parks. Parks are a part of public property, so are streets. We've excluded streets because we've already dealt with streets. And so we've included public property, and we changed parks in a lot of the sections of 1224 to say public property instead of just parks. Section I and Section K remain parks. But all our other public lands, like Douglas Avenue, like our water and sewer plants or wastewater reclamation facility, or other sites that we have, we really didn't have anything that authorized us to say, hey, we're closing this. These are closed or restricted. So we put that in as well. So that's cleaned up this ordinance too. There were some other things I think we wanted to do, but we didn't do this ordinance because we tried to keep all the revisions and changes tied to meeting the obligations of Martin, Boise, Johnson, and Blake in House Bill 3115. But we are confident that this ordinance may be challenged, but I think it is built in a way that gives us some reasonable, objectively reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions and regulations to give us the opportunity to manage our public lands in a way that can balance the use of the individuals in the community, all individuals in the community.
2087.
No, ordinance number 3167.
31 what?
3167.
Councilor Fleck.
Please walk me through the appeals process again, because as I just want every citizen to have a fair opportunity to appeal. And when we're talking about providing, documents, a copy of the order, a request for hearing, request for written review, statement setting forth, I guess this does not sound like this is an easy process for somebody who doesn't have means.
It's not an easy process either side. I mean, it is considerably more than it's ever been, and that's a result of Blake and Johnson, and the city attorney can probably describe it more, but it is for making sure. In the past, it was, hey, you're excluded, here's your little slip of paper, you're out of here. That's what it was, much the same as what Grants Pass had. So this is, and actually some of this is actually from the court case saying you have to do certain processes and associated with it. The 6 days is something that's flexible. You expand it more though, and then they get cited and they're there for 10 days, or they're there for more days before it goes into effect. Basically, somebody's cited, they are given 10 days to leave. They're cited after being told, I think we say twice, they have 2 or more violations, so they have to have more than 2 violations in order to be excluded, period, within that 6 months. And then they're given the notice, hey, these are the things you did, this is where it is. You have 6 days to file the appeal. Here's where you go, City Hall, you have to provide that information, and then they can file an appeal, and then it goes through the court process.
So, and don't get me wrong, I don't want to take away the tools to, address bad behaviors, but I also want to make sure that everybody has their day in court, if you will. And so I guess, I guess I'm going to go ahead and support this, but what I would request as a way of process is that if somebody doesn't have the means to provide these documents, that the city does so for that individual.
Yeah, and I think what we'll be doing is when we get that exclusion, they'll have the handful of documents.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Irvin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can we get a definition of a city facility? We were just having a conversation about facilities and then public property. What are we talking about specifically to facilities?
Can you just, where
I just
Is
heard,
it an
I
added
just heard it
term?
brought up. I think you just mentioned it.
Oh,
Yeah, and we used in the ordinance, we didn't really, some facilities, we in camping or well, in the park definitions, we talk about facilities, and facilities are typically the improvements that are on the piece of property. So those would be our pavilions or playground equipment or whatever recreation thing has been developed. Our facilities on public property, excluding parks, would be our water treatment plant, our fencing, our, those kind of things that we've developed. We tried to stick to, and I think in the definition of park, there's in the original definition, and we continue to keep some of that. We talked about facility, but in the other pieces, we stuck to property because Martin, Boise, Johnson, Blake, and House Bill 3115 apply only to open land outside. Homeless
public lands, public
outside,
property.
Outside public property. Yeah.
That is accessible to
So
all members.
It's like a bathroom in a park would be a city facility.
Yeah, but if you were camping in the bathroom in the park, that's not allowed, period, because that's not protected under Martin or Johnson or Blake or House Bill 3115. Camping inside a public building or a public facility is not allowed and is not protected under the constitutional provisions of the ruling. The only thing that is under those constitutional provisions is that outside public lands. And we had them defined out as just parks, and we realized that we needed to include public property too, because we counted public property in our public management plan. And we're looking at all public lands because that's what the court cases said. So we broke those out because parks are different than public lands, and we may have some public lands that would be suitable for designated camping area. But we have other public lands that are not suitable for use for anything other than what facilities might be on it. Water reservoirs are a great one. We don't want anybody up at our water reservoirs. Those are secure locations. And yeah.
So I understood that a city facility is any improvement on public land. Is that correct?
That's a good general description. Yeah. The only, I mean, maybe it pops up in a couple of places, but I can see it in the definition of city property. It includes all real property, land, and public facilities owned, leased, controlled, or managed. So it would be something that's built.
I heard it in that context, but I was looking at access to city employees' contracts and facilities, and the council member's official capacity must be pre-approved by the city manager. So I was wondering if I had to ask to go to the bathroom under those proposed rules at a park, because that's how it was written. That's why I asked for the definition.
No, that's not in this code either. That's in a separate. That's in the rules.
So definitions shift
yes,
for the same words.
From title to title. Yeah.
What does title mean?
The title in the code, or even chapter to chapter in the code. Yeah.
So if there is no definition in that chapter, how is it defined?
If there's, that could vary. It depends
on context. Yes. Sometimes we refer to just the general definition, Webster's definition.
Who makes that determination?
Well, when you're drafting code, when you're adopting code, if there's something that you're not clear on, you would say, oh, we want this term to mean X. But I mean, how many times do you adopt something that you haven't provided the definition for every single term? So if it becomes an issue and staff needs an interpretation, they would come to the council and say, this says this, we think it reasonably mean X or Y. Here's the various policies behind each definition. What do you think? We need some direction on that.
So ultimately, it's the majority of the council's decision.
Unless you're challenged and you go to court.
Okay, thank you.
And the code is written, our city code has been written over the course of the last 70 years or more. And so as one council defines something one way and thinks that people know what it means, and then 50 years later, a new provision is written into the code that's in another chapter or another title, is it using that or is it a different definition? It all depends on that context. And those are things you'll find throughout statutes or codes throughout everywhere. Because typically you don't go through and rewrite your entire code. Good idea. Used to do it.
I would like to add just a little update, just since I'm here and Richard's covering everything that, you know, you might have questions about. But as there has been questions as we've gone through this very long process about how are we supposed to know what is the right thing to do and what's the wrong thing to do. And as you know, we don't know. You're making the best guess based on the direction that you're receiving. But I do have to provide a little bit of good news in that Medford modified their code along the way that you're doing it here. And in response to a request for class action, the same judge that decided the grants pass, the first one at the district level, ruled against the plaintiffs and said, nope, you don't get a class. You are parroting the grants pass complaint. And that doesn't apply to Medford. Medford has a lot of different release valves, just like what you're including here and what you included in your management land policy and or land management policy. And he said that has to be looked at on an individualized case-by-case manner. And this looks constitutional. There are ways that this type of code can be applied that are constitutional. So that's good news. It supports changes instead of one rule, one size fits all prohibitions.
And in addition to that, a lot of the language in here, we looked at Medford and we also looked at Bend. Bend in Deschutes County is doing pretty substantial stuff. They're actually collaborating more in Deschutes County with the small and rural and larger jurisdictions. But a lot of language that's here, and the same process is being used in Bend, where they don't have parkland because their parks are all managed by a district. But they did look at city property and streets, and we're doing much the same process that they did. So, and we really didn't intend to do that, but we're moving in the same direction.
Councilor Soulsby.
Grants Pass was pretty harsh, though, what they were doing.
They went an extreme.
They went very
was, right, no camping anywhere.
They were.
You can't carry a pillow. You
So
can't have a blanket.
I think that would have been hard for somebody to parrot.
Yeah.
I mean, even if we were doing a lot less than what we're doing. Okay, with that. I have some issues again with because it says in here, under the court case and state statute, camping must be allowed on public lands in the background on here. And then that dictates our language to say camp or camping. And I, as you know, have issues with that because I don't believe that we should be camping. I think, and I'm concerned we change our ordinances, then we can never backtrack on, I mean, I realize we could go back in and change the ordinance again, but does it have to say camping in there? I mean, and then have such a pitch or use or occupy camp materials or camp for the purpose of occupancy, habitation, sheltering for survival, sleeping, storage of personal belongings, carrying on cooking activities, taking measures to keep out of the elements. It's a camp. And so that's concerning again for, you know, what are we doing? You know, so I guess you guys are all okay with that.
I have to agree. I mean, I was part of the drafting of this, but camping makes me cringe.
Yeah.
I don't like that term. I would rather not use it. It's just that it is so burdensome to continue writing lying, sitting, sleeping, keeping warm and dry, lying, sitting, sleeping, keeping warm and dry over and over and over.
It's the law, and this is not.
Unless you define camping to mean that.
To mean the law.
Which
I would rather not do.
Yeah. If that was the will of the council. It's broader right now. And that's partially because you're not limiting use of public property when it's opened to 12 hours or 24 hours periods.
Councilor Fleck.
I'm sorry, I'm tired. Mr. Mayor, I move that the City Council adopt ordinance 3167.
Got a second?
No, I mean, I guess that they would have to have a second to offer a friendly amendment to adjust the language.
We'll
or
have to have a second.
Yeah, to have a second. So no second?
Second.
Okay. So we have a motion with a second.
I don't have it, Mr. Mayor. I don't have that language in front of me, but it would be, I think it would behoove us to have that issue addressed and possibly that language looked into what impact that might have, and if there's better language to use that gives us less restriction, that we have time to have that done.
Is that okay as an amendment?
What is the amendment? I'm sorry.
I guess that's technically not an amendment. My apologies. Yeah.
And I'm sorry. I'm tired. So if there's an amendment to change camping's definition, I'm not opposed.
Just don't know what it should change
Is
to.
there something the city attorney could offer us as a better term?
I couldn't. I mean, I was thinking, we've been brainstorming and trying to come up with something, and I just thought, given the actual definition here that's being proposed in sub B of the definition section, you cannot substitute sitting, sleeping, lying, keeping warm and dry for that meaning. So we could eliminate the word camp and come up with something else that I just can't off the top of my head right now.
And one of the things that we have used camping and camp in the existing city code. And that's really the only reason we put that in. There was no definition of what camping was in the existing code. And if you look under J, certain activities including but not limited to group picnicking, camping, group camping, hiking, driving vehicles, riding bicycles, skateboards, skates, horses may be restricted by the city manager, public works director, or the designee to designated zones or areas, and setting rules for those specific places. We do have activities, special events that do camp, and we don't, I mean, if we go too far and prohibit that, then the Grand Fondo, other activities, Bohemian Mining Days, other things that would then be falling under that same restriction.
I have a solution. Okay. So, so what we do is we use camp that way because it is used throughout the code, and it's the broad meaning that we understand its mean when it is a special permitted use or it's prohibited. But in the recitals, we take out camping when it's used to describe what's constitutionally required, and we just use the long phrase. And then you are prohibiting camping in a park because you mean it, the longer meaning of it, the broader meaning, but we aren't saying that it's constitutionally required to be allowed. Does that satisfy the?
That's
that's a pretty simple change.
Okay.
So yes, I totally open to that.
Okay.
Does the second have to approve the friendly amendment?
I approve. Yeah.
Is there any more discussion then?
So we will remove camping and camp in the recitals, all the whereases, and change that to be sleeping, lying, sitting, keeping warm and dry.
Where it's referencing constitutionally required actions.
Right.
Okay. Good. And the city recorder have that motion, okay? Okay.
Okay, if there's no more discussion, we'll call the question. Recorder will call the roll.
Counselor Savage?
Aye.
Youth Representative?
Aye.
Counselor Fleck?
Aye.
Counselor Stennett?
Aye.
Counselor Irvin?
Aye.
Counselor Roberts?
Aye.
Counselor Solstein?
Aye.
Mayor Gowan?
Aye. Brings us to item F, first vote in ordinance vacating 198 square feet of right of way. Mr. Mongan.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Council has held the public hearing on the proposed ordinance to vacate 198 square feet of right-of-way located at the southeast corner of the intersection of South 7th Street and East Fillmore Avenue, and to accept 502 square feet of dedicated right-of-way. It is now appropriate Council consider the attached draft ordinance for the first vote. After council deliberation, it is recommended that the city council hold the first vote on the attached ordinance. A second vote will be required as the draft ordinance has not been available for more than a week prior to this meeting. It will be brought to council at the first meeting of January 2023 for a second vote.
Councilor Fleck.
Mr. Mayor, move that the council adopt ordinance number 3168.
Motion with a second. Is there any discussion? Will the quarter please call the roll?
Counselor Fleck,
Aye.
Counselor Stunning,
Aye. Sorry. What he said.
What he said. Aye.
Counselor Urban,
Aye.
Counselor Roberts,
Aye.
Counselor Solty,
Aye.
Counselor Savage,
Aye.
Youth Representative,
Aye.
Mayor Gowing.
Aye. Okay, so first vote for 3168 passes. Brings us to business and city council approval of traffic improvements on North Douglas and Ostrander. Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So at the September 9th, 2022 City Council meeting, Councilor Fleck reported a safety concern from a citizen regarding the intersection of North Douglas and Ostrander Lane. Concern was regarding an accident at the intersection where a vehicle traveling north on Douglas failed to yield traffic headed west on Ostrander Lane, causing a vehicle crash in the intersection. Currently, traffic westbound on Ostrander flows into North Douglas, heading south, and traffic northbound on North Douglas flows into Ostrander, or can cross the three-way intersection continuing north on Douglas under the I-5 connector. City engineer of record Branch Engineering reviewed the intersection and crash data from 2009 to present. Crash data shows one accident at the North Douglas Ostrander Lane intersection on October 16, 2022. No other accidents have been reported dating back to 2009. Branch Engineering has made the recommendation that we add a traffic control improvement to the intersection to improve the safety of motorists using the intersection. The following is what Branch recommends. We recommend adding a stop sign with an accept right turn to the northbound lane on North Douglas. Second, they ask for a cross traffic does not stop to add a cross traffic does not stop to the existing stop sign on the southbound lane of Douglas. Then remove on-street parking on North Douglas before the proposed new stop sign on North Douglas. Install new double yellow center line striping on North Douglas, transitioning into Ostrander Lane. Add a new stop bar on the southbound lane of North Douglas where it intersects with Ostrander Lane. Add white lines at the intersection to improve alignment of the intersection of southbound lane of North Douglas and Ostrander. And add a stop ahead advance warning sign on the southbound lane of North Douglas, a minimum of 100 feet before the stop on North Douglas and Ostrander. Branch believes adding recommended improvements to the intersection of North Douglas and Ostrander will clarify turning movements at the intersection, reducing potential future accidents at this site. This intersection has high traffic flows for events to the Western Oregon Exposition and the Cottage Grove Speedway. The recommendation is City Council to approve the recommended traffic control improvements at the intersection North Douglas and Ostrander Lane and direct staff to implement the changes. Attached is the map of the proposed changes and the approximate cost of adding the striping and the signs is approximately $1,500, which would come from the street maintenance fund.
Councilor Fleck.
Well, first, I'd like to thank staff for looking into this. This is awesome. And with that, I'll move that the City Council approve the recommended traffic control improvements to the intersection of North Douglas and Ostrander Lane and direct staff to implement the changes.
I proudly second.
Got a motion with a second. Is there any discussion? Councilor Savage.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say I really appreciate this map. I did have a couple questions as I was reading through the memo and I turned the page and they were all answered with the map. So thank you so much for including this, and I think they did a really good job of explaining it. Thank you.
Council Roberts.
Yeah, thank you, Mike, and Public Works for getting this done. Lived here 32 years. There's been more than many times I've almost been clocked pulling out of here coming up the races, people coming around that turn. And so this is great. Thank you very much.
Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item B, City Council approved the local government grant agreement for Bohemia Park Entry Plaza. Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So on July 15, 2022, the Oregon State Parks Commission approved a $346,500 local government grant to the city for the Bohemia Park Entry Plaza splash pad improvement. On November 15, 2022, the Oregon State Parks and Recreation Department supplied the city with the local government grant program agreement for the Bohemia Park Entry Plaza splash pad grant for city approval. The project must be completed by December 31st, 2024. Construction is anticipated to begin in 2023, late spring or early summer. The project is projected to be completed by December 31st, 2023. The recommendation is for the council to approve the Oregon ORPD grant agreement LG 22-016 and authorize the city manager to sign.
I had Amy Maraday sign up to speak on this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm very excited about the splash pad. I am concerned about global climate change, however, and I don't know what the grant limitations of the grant are, but it occurs to me that having an alternative power source to run the water in the advent of a heat dome would be a lot of power to pull that water, but it might be emergency preparedness for the future that we're looking at. And so I'm asking you to, the council, to consider that the design of this facility allow for on-site generation of power. So in case there's a climactic event that takes our power grid out, we would still be able to cool people. Thank you.
Council Stannett.
Thank you. Mr. Stewart, but apologies if I should already know this, but is there a place where the plans for the park are accessible? It's a pretty exciting project to the public.
I haven't put them on the website yet, so if people would like to get a copy of the plans to date, which have been drawn by city staff. Ryan Sisson drew up some plans that accompany Mr. Doherty's conceptual plans. We are working on getting an agreement through this body to approve another task order with Branch to do the construction documents. So the actual construction documents and the fine details have not been created.
Okay.
Once they are, then they're available on the website.
Thanks.
Councilor Fleck.
Mr. Mayor, move that the council approve the ORPD grant agreement LG 22-016 and authorize the city manager to sign the agreement.
Second.
I have a motion with a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Concerns of council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I want to say it's been a joy working with you over these many years. This is tough for me to say this. I'll quote a good friend of mine, Robert Hunter, great writer, wrote lyrics for the Grateful Dead. What a long, strange trip it's been. 5 years ago, I got to start dating the love of my life very closely. And we've spent a lot of time in the Wawalla Mountains in her cabin. Just recently, we have purchased multiple acreage in the Wawalla Mountains. So it's really hard for me to say this. I have an opportunity to do something I've wanted to do for a long time, which is live on a ranch with the woman I love. So at the conclusion of the meeting on January 9th, I resign from this seat. And I hope the council will do its best to find someone worthy to replace it. It's bittersweet. I really don't, I love this town. I've been here 32 years. It's really hard for me to leave, but like I said, I have this wonderful opportunity. This place is absolutely stunning. It's Hollywood. It's Buffalo. It's sheep, mountains, and snow, and hiking. Mike knows, he's been up there. And I have a chance to homestead with someone I love very much, someone who's a very unique and powerful woman. Very lucky to be with her. So I'm going to resign at the end of the next meeting. I want to thank everybody. Richard Myers, City Attorney, Paige Stewart, Greg Urban. You're going places. You're a very good counselor. John Stennett, of course, my mayor. Mike, our story is pretty unique. We did not get along in the very beginning, and now I have learned so much from you. But it's going to be hard to walk away from this and this town. But it's just time for me to go. So that's what I have to say. Thank you very much.
Councilor Savage?
Thank you so much. It's so hard to follow that. We're going to miss you, Councilor Roberts. I have lots of things to tick off on my boxes, so I'm going to try and make it super, super quick. When we were in Kansas City at the National League of Cities, they talked about putting in an application, a letter of intent for All-American City. I would really like to encourage Cottage Grove to do that again this year. I believe the letter of intent needs to be out soon. It's not due, I think, till February, the actual application, but the letter of intent helps. It's not required, but it helps. And my understanding is that the focal point of receiving this award is what we do with our youth. And I would like to see the YAC do some things. I'm really excited about where they're going. So I wanted to make note of that. While at the National League of Cities, there was a booth talking about Ukraine and potentially becoming a sister city to a similar size city in Ukraine. I'm really highly interested in that. I'm going to give you guys all of this stuff and let you unpack them, but I want to tell you what I'm giving you. So I'd like us to look into something like that. Something that we learned about was broadband. Back in the 50s, it was made known that every home should have a telephone. And laws were passed so that every home had a telephone, and we have not done that yet for the internet. I know we have talked about doing more broadband here. That's part of the Main Street program. So I know that we're well on our way, but there's all sorts of information and grants. So there's a little add on that. Here's a booklet of strategic partners, which is really exciting. You guys are probably already aware, but I've just dived into it and I'm really excited. There's really amazing companies that we could partner with that could help us move forward. Councilor Irving, I talked with some folks about a skate park, and they very specifically said that Oregon is getting lots and lots of grants, and I brought you back not one, but two skate park books, and this one specifically, the Sphone Ranch. I talked to him, and he knows a lot, so his contact is stapled. Both of them have contacts stapled to them, so I really want you to reach out to them if I can help. You're taking the lead on this, and I really want to encourage that, but I saw this and I got all excited. The next thing that I grabbed was really exciting for me. There's grants out there for outdoor exercise equipment, and I immediately flashed into the Bohemia Park project that we're working on. So I don't know if it's too late to look at this or if that was already in the works, but there's grants out for some outdoor equipment, which I thought was really cool right there at the beginning of the Row River Trail. There's also a really amazing company that does big, beautiful clocks, and they're really terribly stupid expensive, but they have some grants and stuff. So I kind of curious if that's something that can go in there too. I also want to talk about the fact that there's lots of classes that we can take. I am going to see if the League of Oregon Cities can help us potentially get into some of these classes for a lower cost. But it'd be really interesting to, they've got retail strategies for economic development, culture clinic, inspiring every employee every day, mindful leadership for your city, leading through disruption. It just sounds really exciting, and how we can all work together. Lastly, I toured this veterans village, which is on the cutting edge of providing homes for unhoused veterans. And they do it in a way that is incredibly meaningful. They have this incredible budget that's all donated, and they refuse to take federal dollars because they don't want to be told how to spend those dollars, but they do it. And they're willing to come here and work with us. So I know that Mayor Gowing has potentially already talked with these folks, and something could be in the works. But here's the packet, and I'd love to reach out to them and see if we could potentially be a good fit for this program, because they're amazing. They're branching out to all sorts of different cities. Lastly, something that I hear continuously is, when you go to these meetings, what do you learn? So I sat down with all of my notes, and I looked at every single class that I took and all the notes, and I wrote you guys a paper, and it's 6 pages. And I'm not going to read it to you now, but I'd like to give it to you to put it into the agenda. So if you wanted to read it, it'll, I'm assuming, be on the next agenda. You're welcome to read it. What I really gleaned is we are not alone here. What we are experiencing as a community feels very isolated because we're right here in the thick of it. But this is every town America, everywhere. Everyone is dealing with this, and we're all struggling together. It's really, really hard and complicated, and yet here we are just trying to make the best decisions we can with the information that we have. So it is my intention to get all the information I can to make the best decision. So I'll conclude with an ask. I would like to go to Washington, D.C. in March. And if it's okay, I am really excited to talk with leaders at the next level to see if we can advocate for some of these big asks.
Councilor.
Ms. Mayor, I do want to personally thank you for your service, and it's been really pretty cool serving alongside of you and seeing you just grow into the role and everything. And thank you for your help on the skate park and all the other initiatives. Look forward to working together in the future. Sincerely.
Thank you.
I want to give a brief report on the Lane Economic Committee meeting. We had the opportunity to hear from the new president of Lane Community College. And I would say my leaving impression from that meeting was I was inspired with confidence in her ability to articulate the vision, confidence in her leadership style, and I'm looking forward to seeing what direction she takes the college. She mentioned of the bond that passed, $400,000 was earmarked for the educational component of the satellite campus that's over by the high school, as it's coming up in conjunction with the high school and the health clinic that is to be built there. So ask for continued updates on that, and hopefully I can relay that information. I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Councilor Fleck.
Well, I too want to thank our mayor, Jeff. Jeff beat both Jake and I to get in that seat in the first time. And, you know, it's kind of a bittersweet sort of thing because you have become just such an incredible mayor. And I really appreciate your time and patience with some of the more stubborn people on your council, who shall remain nameless. But no, it's been a joy to serve with you. You're a man of integrity, hard work, and I really appreciate our time. And Council Roberts, we will miss you, but I expect to go on some hikes with you because I go over there every year and I love the Wallowas.
I got a cabin waiting for you.
They're awesome. So while we won't have your presence here, I certainly hope to see you in the future. So going forward, I'm hoping that we're going to set up in the spring a goal session, as we typically do every 2 years, and so that we can all have a Saturday where we can, talk about what we want to see going forward for the next 2 years. As part of that, there's a couple things that I would suggest we look at. I agree with Mr. Toddy. I think we should look at the MUPTI and see about does a low income component make sense? If say 20% of the units have to be low income, what kind of burdens does that put on city staff to, annually check those income levels? And we need to talk to developers to see if that's actually going to hamper our efforts of building more property. So that's something, the LRPD as well. I know those two have come up that we want to talk about those. So I'm hoping those will be on there. I had an interesting conversation with a constituent about the election, asking about the ward situation. And one of the comments is we have not realigned those wards in many, many years. And it dawned on me, the census was 2 years ago, and we probably should have looked at those boundaries in the last year. So I think we should look at that, in the next couple of years, look at the population in the wards and look, are they equally distributed? The question came up too, do they make sense? I know back in, gosh, I think it was the late 90s. It was right before I ran for office the first time that our citizens actually voted to amend the charter to where only the citizens in the ward voted for those ward people. And then it was either 2 or 4 years later, they decided, nope, that wasn't a good idea and reverted back to what we currently have, where you have to live in the ward, but you don't necessarily, folks all over the city get to vote for you. So I guess the question is, are the demographics in the different sections of our city different enough to justify that or not? So I'd like us to take a look at it, because I thought it was a very interesting question that I did not have the answer to. So I think I'd like to see that. Like I said, I would love to see about getting Square One or some other, nonprofit to see if we can manage. Because I do agree. I stand by my comments that I think that managed is a challenge. And so I would love to see if there's something we can do for our overflow site. And I'll just kind of stop there because I think I'm tired and I've forgotten anything else I would have brought up. Thank you.
Councilor Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilor Roberts, you have brought a crazy different style of Cottage Grove, and we will all miss all your beautiful pictures that you put up on Cottage Grove, and just don't forget about us. Come back and visit, and you'll be missed. And
Thank you. I really have felt that I have paid back to this community what it gave me with the things I have done with the help of this council. Yeah.
And Mayor Gowing, I don't remember not ever knowing you, and I was honored to cut that crazy long gray ponytail off of you when you won mayor and make you more mayoral. And thank you for all the time you've given to the city, and you will be missed.
Cassidy, do you want to report on Kansas City?
So I was the youth that was selected to go to Kansas City for the National League of Cities Conference City Summit. To make a long story short, it was very enlightening. I learned a lot. What the youth did was different than the general sessions. We had youth sessions that were based in mental health, civil discourse, and social entrepreneurship. It was very interesting to hear all of the ideas youth had from around the nation. Yeah, it was crazy having that many youth in a room with so many different ideas from just across the nation. Like I said, we were able to talk about, we were able to have some tough conversations and discuss solutions that we can bring to our cities, what works, what doesn't, and what we might be able to implement. So that being said, it was a great trip, and I'm really thankful I was able to go.
Councilor Stennett.
Thank you.
It's a long night.
I hope, no, I know everybody's tired, but I hope you'll permit a long list. No, I'm kidding. I don't want to belabor the point. I just want to thank Mayor Cowan, Councilor Roberts, you guys are both the picture of dedication to your community and a credit to this place and to the tribe that makes people want to serve over there. I've done so much for it. And excited for the future that we're able to listen to that. So thank you.
Thank you. I think I'm just going to let it go at that and won't say anything. And brings us to business from city manager.
So the first item, and Councilor Savage has asked for your support in going to the National Congressional City Conference. The low registration prices end at the end of December, and looking at your budget for travel and subsistence and registration and everything, you have about 13,000 left over right now in travel and subsistence, travel and lodging. That's because some other city paid for the 3 people who went to National League of Cities. We don't know who it was, but there's a different AMX card, American Express card that paid. It wasn't the city's card that paid for your hotel rooms. So we contacted the hotel to try to get that. That was $3,000. So there's about 10,000 if we get something back from the hotel. They haven't talked to us yet. They haven't come back, and it's been more than a week. And so I don't know what the situation is there. But we've got $10,000 in travel and subsistance. And then we've got $3,000 left over in your budget right now for lodging, for the actual registration. The cost to go to National League of Cities, Congressional City in March is it's going to be about $3,000, almost $4,000. So there's still plenty of money to go to the spring conference for LOC, and you'll probably have money left over. So if that is okay, and if I can get some consensus, we can get the registration going. And actually, the flights to DC are really cheap right now, too, for March. So it's probably a good idea to get them as quickly as you can, because they're probably not going to stay that cheap. So if we can have a consensus from the council, we'll go ahead and make the reservations and get Councilor Savage registered for the Congressional City Conference in DC. Okay, we will do that. All America City, I talked to them as well at the ICMA conference, the City Managers Conference, and they actually have a separate program that I think we may be more interested in. It's the All America City Hall of Fame. Since we've been an All America City twice, you don't have to go through the 40-page application form and all of the stuff that's required there. It's a little shorter, and you can detail what you've done over the course of the few years since and how things have continued, and apply for that Hall of Fame award rather than the full-blown All-America City process. Competition is not as stiff as the others, and although we'd be able to survive the other competition, but it does take a lot of work and energy, and we possibly would be looking at that Hall of Fame. So that may be an area that we'll look at as well. Wards, yeah, with the completion of the 2000 census, the 2020 census, we should have done that, but hey, there was stuff going on, and it took a long time for that census to come back out. But yeah, it's time to look at those wards and make sure they're balanced. It isn't as tight of a constitutional requirement because we don't vote by ward. So that's where if we were voting by ward, then we would have to make sure every vote counts the same. But it is something that we'll look at and see. We'll try to keep the wards, and looking at the proposals, we'll try to keep them sort of how they are, because we've got them kind of quadrants, and so it's made a lot more sense than it used to. But that would be a good idea to take that 2020 census and start looking at how so that. And see that box over there. And Mr. Mayor, since this is your last meeting, before you adjourn, we want to give you something. Our crew has made you this wonderful plaque. This is made from Diana. This is made from flooring that we pulled up out of the 2 offices in the armory, where the bathrooms went, and tile went down. So this is actually 1931 flooring from the armory that they did this plaque for you. And you'll notice it's missing something. So as soon as you adjourn the meeting, you can take that gavel that you've used for the last 6 years and put it on the plaque. So thank you very much for your work with me. And this doesn't end it. When you adjourn the meeting, we will move into a party. We have a number of people, I believe, that have been on since 8:30, waiting to do a recognition of service review, and I think we may have some guests that have come as well. But we're going to have some food and some little treats and an opportunity to also present you with some other items as well. And I think our city attorney is going to have some things to say for you too. So
some online people will talk.
Probably.
Because I see Mayor McGinnis.
Yeah, she's here. I've been waiting patiently through the last hour and a half, 2 hours. So we'll share that stuff after you adjourn.
City attorney?
So I'm holding those comments, obviously. And I'm tired, so you all know how I get far less articulate. And I feel the need for speed. So that just doesn't work very well together. I just want to be clear that as I heard through the council rule discussion that the conversation is going to be postponed, I want to be really clear that I withheld explanations, descriptions, policy choices, options for you. I'm prepared to provide all of that when it's a better forum and we aren't pressed for time. So I don't want to look like I was withholding information. I just recognized we were going to have that conversation later. And we're going to address issues, fairness, law, current practice, et cetera. That's all the stuff that's behind those changes. Councilor Roberts, it has been a pleasure. It's been a joy, and you gave me a run for my money. Lots of different questions, explain that to me. I'm like, okay, I know I can do this. I can. So thank you for that opportunity. And I just also wanted to welcome Mayor-elect Dennis Solsby. Yeah, thanks. Now I'm ready. I'm done.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we have no items removed from the consent. We're adjourned.